Black and White, by Liu Jiming, translated by Chen Gang, Part 1, Volume 1. Chapter 1. 1. Literary Club. When Guzheng took her college entrance exam, she didn't apply to the law department of Dongjiang University as planned. She applied to the Chinese department instead. The school made a last-minute adjustment to transfer her to the law department. Guzheng had other dreams, though. She wanted to be a poet or a Guzheng player, but life had other plans. She ended up in a state of sadness and depression for the whole semester. Guzheng thought the law department courses were dull and uninspiring, as tasteless as chewing wax, and utterly failed to capture her interest. Apart from a research on modern Chinese legal systems course, all her elective courses were from the Chinese and foreign language departments. While she might have been a bit absent-minded and lacking in enthusiasm in her law department classes, she found the electives from other departments captivating. On top of that, she joined the Langtaosha Literary Club. The Chinese Department Student Union started the Langtaosha Literary Club, and most members were from the Chinese department. Guzheng was the only female student from the law department, which made her stand out even more. When the Langtaosha Literary Club was looking for new members, she decided to leap of faith and sign up. She felt a bit insecure in the law department, especially around her new classmates from the Chinese department, who seemed so talented. The recruitment booth for the Langtaosha Literary Club was set up in front of the gymnasium. The gym was a 1930s Republic building with carved beams and painted buildings, ancient glazed tiles on the eaves glittering. It's said to be a famous overseas Chinese leader who donated funds to build it. The open space in front of the gymnasium also had a bust of the overseas Chinese leader with kind eyes like an old grandfather. The statue was surrounded by a lush patch of begonia trees, adding a touch of natural beauty to the setting. Gu Feng's very first photo after entering the school was taken right in front of the gymnasium. This heartwarming moment happened shortly after the start of the new semester. The area was filled with life, home to booths for various new student clubs. Each one had a desk with recruitment notices and posters, showing all the different options for clubs, like the UFO Research Club, Radio Enthusiasts Association, Laozi Study Club, Chess Society, New Audiovisual Enthusiasts Association, I Ching Society, Mayflowers Chorus, Youth Politician Club, New Lakeside Poetry Society, Pipa Orchestra, Chaigong Research Association, and Langtaosha Literary Club. The Langtaosha Literary Club's booth was at the far end, right before the sports field. While the other club's booths were bustling with activity, Langtaosha Literary Club felt a bit more tranquil. 2 students, a boy and a girl, were in charge of recruitment. Guzheng asked for a registration form. "Which department were you from?" a boy with glasses and a thin face asked as he handed her the form. Guzheng paused the pen she was about to use to fill out the form and replied, "Law department." "Law department?" the girl next to him repeated, taking a closer look at her. "Do you have any works?" Guzheng could sense some pressure from the girl's expression and tone, and it was clear that submitting works was a requirement for applicants according to the Langtaosha Literary Club's recruitment notice. She glanced at the girl. Tall figure, shiny black shoulder-length hair, very white skin, and a pair of beautiful phoenix eyes that seemed to be scrutinizing Guzheng. With a hint of Conde's, looked down and silently pulled out a stack of manuscript paper from her school bag, handing it over. The female student took the poems and started reading. It was a poem Guzheng had recently written called Under the Crabapple Tree. Where did that lush grapevine go? Where did that pot of elegant lilacs go? Jingdezhen flower pots by the fountain, amidst the blue twilight, conveying distant warmth. The crabapple fruits fell all over the autumn. They bloomed so fiery red back then. The long stone bench once held 2 people. Now there's only 1 kitten, conveying the evening loneliness to the guests. The evening breeze shakes a string of laughter, shaking the round rings of the crabapple tree, shaking the records made from the rings. But the record isn't round, leaving a void unfillable. The girl read the poem quickly, then lifted her face and said to Guzheng, "What a line. The record isn't round, leaving a void unfillable. It reminds me a bit of Xu Ting's style." "Really?" Guzheng was delighted to hear the female student's praise. Xu Ting was a poet she admired. "Indeed," the girl nodded, her face bright with enthusiasm. "You must like Xu Ting too, right?" Guzheng hesitated a bit before saying, "I do. The twin masts." "How wonderful! I love that poem too." The girl clapped like a child and recited, "The fog dampens my twin wings, yet the wind forbids me to hesitate any longer. Oh, shore, beloved shore, just yesterday I said goodbye to you. Today, here you were again." Like a professional broadcaster's, her voice was full of emotion and power. Her whole demeanor had shifted from earlier, and now she was much more enthusiastic towards Guzheng. She exchanged a look with the young man beside her, then turned back. "Congratulations, you've been accepted. You have incredible literary talent. It's hard to believe you're a law student." She spoke rapidly, holding out her hand to Guzheng. "Let me introduce myself. I'm Li Hong." Li Hong was the president of the Langtaosha Literary Club. Guzheng had seen this name in the club's publications, and that's how they met. Li Hong was from the Chinese department, 2 years ahead of Guzheng. She wrote poetry, novels, and essays displaying multi-talented skills. But what really caught Guzheng's eye was Li Hong's exceptional recitation skills. Guzheng first got to experience Li Hong's talent at the Mid-Autumn Poetry Festival, where she hosted the event and recited a poem. It wasn't her own work, though. She recited the masterpiece of the female poet Xu Ting, titled To the Oak Tree. Who among the female students in the university's Chinese departments didn't like Xu Ting? Guzheng had read To the Oak Tree in her 9th grade class and copied it into her diary, reciting it numerous times. The poem's rich imagery and melodious sentences touched her heart more than once, leading her to fall in love with literature. That day, Guzheng didn't recite poetry but played a piece called High Mountains and Flowing Water on her guzheng. Her guzheng had been with her since elementary school. This was the first time she played it in college. That day, the Langtaosha Club poetry gathering was held that evening in the small forest near the foreign language department. It was chilly for the Mid-Autumn Festival, and the full moon was hanging in the clear night sky like a lantern over a frozen lake. The pale moonlight filtered through the trees, scattering like pools of mercury on the ground. Some students wore light jackets, but Li Hong, in her summer dress with a white background and red flowers, with her hair loosely tied up, gave off a sense of freedom and romance that echoed the mood of the poetry. Her round face and striking phoenix eyes made the perfect image. As she recited the line, "I must be the kapok tree standing near you. As a tree, standing alongside you," she leaned forward gracefully, raising both hands high, her fingers spreading outward like a stately oak. At that moment, not only Guzheng but all the other students in the crowd were mesmerized. Li Hong reciting To the Oak became a beautiful memory, a vivid picture of Guzheng's college years that wouldn't fade away, etched deeply into her mind for a long, long time. Although Li Hong and Guzheng were very different in personality, temperament, and interests, they shared a special connection. If they were flowers, Li Hong would be a peony, gorgeous, warm, cheerful, bold, and a little flamboyant with a strong presence. Guzheng would be like a rose or a begonia, elegant, shy, reserved, and a bit unique. It's hard to imagine how two people so different could become such close friends. Even Guzheng was sometimes at a loss for words. Li Hong, a local, came from a family with deep roots in the city. Her father was the director of a large state-owned enterprise. To set herself apart from the other locals, Li Hong chose to speak Mandarin with a slight northeastern accent instead of the local dialect. Her parents were both from the north, and her upbringing was filled with the warmth and enthusiasm of her northern roots. With this in mind, Li Hong applied for a position at the university's radio station in her freshman year. Still, after becoming the president of the Langtao Literary Club, she stopped working at the radio station. Her wide range of interests and talents were on display. Maybe because of her family background, Li Hong was also intensely interested in an official career. She first served as president of the Chinese Department Student Union and later became Minister of Propaganda of the University Student Union. She was such a popular candidate that she almost became president of the student union. Li Hong was a complex person, with a big heart and a lot of depth. On one hand, she had a strong artistic vibe. On the other hand, she was fascinated by an official career. She was often her own boss and even a bit rebellious, embodying a rebellious spirit typical of that era. One time, when Guzheng went to Li Hong's dorm room, she saw Li Hong wearing a set of semi-transparent silk pajamas with two complete sexy breasts almost exposed, exuding a strong fragrance of perfume. Although no boys would break into the girls' dormitory, it's still rare for anyone to dress so revealingly. Even more surprising was that Li Hong didn't seem to mind at all in the face of Guzheng's amazed gaze. She crossed her legs, chewed gum, held a book of selected Chinese avant-garde poems, and glanced at Guzheng, asking her, "Have you read The Bedroom of the Single Woman by Yile?" Guzheng had not selected the elective course, Chinese avant-garde poetry, offered this semester by the Chinese department. After all, she wasn't a Chinese major, so she didn't have the same in-depth understanding of literature that the students from the Chinese department possessed. Usually, when she went to literary readings, she focused on foreign literature, so she wasn't too familiar with contemporary Chinese literature. She was more familiar with foreign classic writers, like the English poets Shelley and Byron, the French poet Rimbaud, the American poet Dickinson, and the Soviet poet Yesenin. While this reading list might seem a bit amateurish to the Chinese majors, Guzheng didn't mind. She didn't care whether she had read the poem The Bedroom of the Single Woman or knew the name Yile. "Let me recite it for you," Li Hong said enthusiastically. "Too many naked sketches in this small room." A male compatriot happened to push the door, calling out, "Turkey bathroom!" He didn't know I had locked the door tightly in the summer. I am indeed a substitute customer, self-loving. Long limbs, slender figure, compact buttocks, slanting shoulders, bowl-shaped breasts, slightly sway. Each piece of muscle is full of passion. I am my own model. I created art, and art created me. The bed is full of albums, socks, and shorts on the table. The winter plum in the glass bottle is withering. Dim, golden blooms on the ground, soft cushions and backrests on all sides. You could sleep peacefully in any corner. You don't come to live with me. The entire poem consisted of 14 sections, each concluding with, "You don't come to live with me." It was the first time Guzheng heard such bold expressions of female intimate thoughts in poetry. She was taken aback by the boldness of the confession, as if she had seen a woman proudly displaying her most private parts in public. Guzheng felt embarrassed, as if it wasn't Li Hong who was reciting the poem, but herself. She felt a wave of nausea wash over her, and she was almost overcome with the urge to vomit. Guzheng had wanted to share a poem she'd just written with Li Hong, but she had to find a way to deal with the sudden nausea that hit her. She quietly slipped out of Li Hong's dorm room. The other girls in the dorm room were stunned, and Li Hong was also a bit puzzled, throwing away the book, slipping on her slippers and chasing after Guzheng, calling out as she ran, "Guzheng! Guzheng! What's wrong with you?" 2. Lace. Guzheng didn't stop by Li Hong's dorm room for 2 weeks. This was really strange because they used to meet every week before that. Guzheng even missed a lecture organized by the Langtao Literary Club. It was the first time she missed a Langtao Literary Club event. During that time, rumors began to circulate among the Chinese department's male and female students about Guzheng and Li Hong. One evening, while Guzheng was studying alone, she overheard 2 girls in the front row whispering to each other. "I heard that Li Hong from the Chinese department and Guzheng from the law department were lace. Is that true?" "Well, I saw it with my own eyes. Is that fake?" "Oh, I'm not surprised. They're so compatible." Guzheng recognized one of the chubby girls as a member of the Langtao Literary Club who shared a dorm room with Li Hong. Guzheng wasn't sure what lace meant, but from those 2 girls' mysterious and slightly annoyed looks, she figured it wasn't a good term. She didn't want to cause any drama, so she said nothing. She just picked up her backpack, quietly left the classroom and went straight to the library. After searching through a big encyclopedia, she finally found the entry for lace. But as she read it, her face flushed red, and she looked around nervously as if she was afraid someone might see her. She quickly put the book back on the shelf and hurried out of the library. Since that day, a deep sense of shame had taken hold of Guzheng's heart. She felt like she had done something unspeakable and couldn't sleep for several nights. She felt like everyone was looking at her with strange eyes. A few days later at noon, Guzheng had just walked out of the cafeteria after finishing lunch when Li Hong stopped her at the door. She was holding a lunchbox, so she had obviously just finished eating too. "Guzheng, I've been wondering what you've been up to lately. Were you avoiding me? Is it because of Yilei's poem?" Li Hong's excited chatter caught everyone's attention at the cafeteria entrance. Guzheng paused, unsure of how to respond. Li Hong, sensing the need for privacy, suggested they step away to the nearby playground. Since it was lunch break, few people were on the playground, making it seem a bit empty. After walking a few steps on the oval track, Li Hong stopped Guzheng in front of her and playfully pressed her on the shoulder, saying, "Come on, you little enemy. What did I do to you? You didn't just avoid me, you didn't even participate in the literary club's activities." She spoke in a warm, familiar tone, as if she were an older sister talking to a younger sister. Since they became good friends, Li Hong had always spoken to her like this, and Guzheng had gotten used to it. But today she felt a bit uneasy, as if they had just met recently. Guzheng didn't know what to say. Should she mention the shame she felt when she listened to her recite that poem? What could she say that would make her feel better? Could it be that she was having a hard time distinguishing between art and life? But Li Hong, sitting nearby with her legs crossed and exclaiming, "You don't come and live with me?" made her feel a bit uneasy. This sensation was reminiscent of when she had encountered the handwritten novel The Heart of a Young Girl in her brother's bedroom. She felt that something she had always hidden had been revealed, making her feel even more confused and nervous than when Li Hong recited The Bedroom of a Single Woman. Later, Guzheng shared rumors about them with a bit of hesitation. But compared to the strange feeling she had when Li Hong recited The Bedroom of a Single Woman, the lesbian rumors didn't bother her as much. She was just looking for an excuse to brush off Li Hong's inquiries. Little did she know, her words had the opposite effect, and Li Hong burst out laughing. She was laughing so hard that her face flushed and tears streamed from her eyes. "Oh my God, I'm dying of laughter," she exclaimed. She bent over, laughing while wiping her eyes with her hand. She pointed at Guzheng with her index finger and then at her own nose, laughing. "Some people say we were lesbian, homosexuals. What on earth does that mean? I've been in love since high school and boys are still lining up to pursue me now." She paused, as if sharing a secret, and added, "But I don't even look at any of them. As for what kind of man I like, do you want to know?" Li Hong's expression was a mix of playfulness and sincerity, and Guzheng, slightly perplexed, didn't respond for a moment. She was a young woman with no relationship experience and little knowledge of men and women. In the mid to late 1980s, female college students on campus weren't as conservative about love and chastity as their older sisters were. Every weekend and holiday, the campus would host a cotillion, and the ballroom, which was temporarily converted into a cafeteria, was often bustling with activity. There were always luxury cars lined up in front of the girls' dormitory. The car owners ranged from young men to middle-aged ones, all dressed in sharp suits with slicked-back hair and luxury watches on their wrists. They pushed through the crowd in the dance hall, their eyes sweeping over the pretty girls like flashlights. Once they locked onto a target, they would reel her into the car like a fish on a hook and speed away, leaving behind a pungent smell of gasoline. However, Li Hong was not the kind of girl who was shallow or vulgar. She had a much higher taste in life than most. She didn't often go to dance in those cafeteria restaurants with strong, rancid odors of leftover food. Her rumba and tango were unmatched among the girls in the literature club. She was also the runner-up in the school's sorority dance competition. In Li Hong's eyes, places like the cafeteria restaurant were too low-grade. When she heard about another girl being chatted up by a social boss, she rolled her eyes and said, "Cheap." Li Hong had high expectations for herself, both in her personal career and in her relationships. With her supportive family and exceptional talent and appearance, it's no surprise that so many people were interested in her. Boys were chasing her from both inside and outside the school. Guzheng knew that a few boys in the Langtaosha Literature Club loved Li Hong, either openly or secretly. But Li Hong had more than once publicly declared that she was an idealist in love and a realist in marriage, and would never easily give herself away based on impulsive feelings. Her declaration must have scared off a lot of boys. At that moment, Li Hong saw Guzheng's confused look and laughed, waving her hand and saying, "Don't worry about it. I'd better not say it, or I'm afraid I'll scare you." Guzheng was convinced that the man Li Hong liked was Lang Tao. Li Hong, a high achiever both personally and professionally, revealed that the man she liked was Lang Tao, a well-known figure at Dongjiang University. His impressive resume and academic achievements made him a standout new star in the academic world. Guzheng had the pleasure of attending a lecture by Lang Tao, the 3 Encounter. Lang Tao was quite a famous character at Dongjiang University. His resume was impressive, to say the least. He joined the Department of Philosophy at Dongjiang University at the tender age of 15, and by the time he was 19, he was already an undergraduate student with exceptional grades, which earned him a spot at the prestigious Institute of Philosophy of the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences for his master's degree in aesthetics. At 22, he proudly held a master's degree in his hand. As a publicly funded student, he went to the University of Marburg in West Germany to study philosophy and obtain a doctorate. He stayed in the school to specialize in the study of Heidegger and published the book On Heidegger's Poetics at the age of 25, which caused a strong reaction in the academic community. At 26, he was welcomed back to China as an exceptional talent, and at 28 was promoted to professor, becoming a notable star in the academic world. Guzheng had the opportunity to attend one of Lang Tao's lectures. Although Guzheng had a deep love for literature and art, the complexities of Heidegger's philosophy might be a bit overwhelming for a law undergraduate student. On top of that, she had a rough time with some of her midterms last semester, which led to a heart-to-heart with her counselor. They talked about how she might be neglecting her studies a bit. This semester, she's made a conscious choice to focus more on her major courses and had been going to the library daily to review her lessons. If it weren't for Li Hong's repeated encouragement, she might not have given up her precious self-study time in the library to attend a lecture unrelated to her major. "It's Lang Tao's lecture. If you haven't heard of him, can you still call yourself a Dongjiang University student?" Li Hong said playfully, her voice warm with enthusiasm. "Besides, don't you like poetry? Heidegger is crucial in the minds of many world-class poets, from Eliot and Pound to Ginsberg. Ginsberg, the Howler School's representative, has influenced their thoughts by Heidegger." At that time, Guzheng had just become good friends with Li Hong not long before. Li Hong's warm and knowledgeable presence won Guzheng's admiration. Guzheng had started to look up to her, and she even let Li Hong guide her in picking out clothes and books. One day, she saw 2 books about Heidegger at Li Hong's bedside. One was Being and Time, and the other was Lang Tao's German work On Heidegger's Poetics. She picked up the thick, black-covered Being and Time book, feeling heavy like a brick in her hands. She put it down with awe, and then picked up the thin On Heidegger's Poetics book, which felt light in her hands. However, she didn't understand any of the words on it. "It's in German," Li Hong said gently beside her. "Do you understand German?" Guzheng asked Li Hong, curious. Li Hong paused, a smile playing on her lips, and replied, "I'm learning. Guzheng noticed that her face was a bit flushed. At that time, Guzheng didn't know Li Hong had already fallen in love with Lang Tao. Lang Tao's lecture was held in the recently opened New Building 4 that day. Since it's a historical building, most of the university's classrooms were small, with the biggest holding less than 100 people. In the 1980s, Dongjiang University had a vibrant academic community with many student organizations and frequent lectures. The audience size varied depending on the topic and the speaker's popularity, with more people attending lectures by well-known speakers or on topics that caught their interest. To accommodate the need for lectures with larger audiences and the continuous expansion of Dongjiang University in recent years, many departments had been increasing their capacities. The university had been growing and growing, and its original teaching buildings just couldn't keep up. So, they've built a new teaching building, New Building 4, on a vacant lot next to the library. Since the beginning of the last semester, all lectures with larger audiences had been held there. The lecture was scheduled to start at 7 p.m., and Guzheng arrived at the new 4th floor 15 minutes early and walked to the door of the large amphitheater classroom that could accommodate 800 people, only to find it packed with no empty seats. Even the hallway, the area under the platform, and the windowsills on both sides of the classroom were full of people. It had been agreed that Li Hong would save a spot for Guzheng in advance, so she had to force her way through. It was a bit of a challenge, though, as she had to be careful not to accidentally step on anyone's foot or knock over her laptop bag. After squeezing into the middle of the classroom, she looked around, but her eyes were strained, and she couldn't spot Li Hong anywhere. At that moment, Guzheng noticed 2 students, a boy and a girl, busy setting up a sound amplifier and microphone on the platform. The girl was none other than Li Hong. "Li Hong, I'm here! Where were you sitting?" Guzheng called out to her twice, but the classroom was so noisy that Li Hong, who was busy, couldn't hear a thing. There were only a few minutes left before the lecture began. Guzheng stood in the bustling aisle, surrounded by people from all directions, making it hard for her to breathe. Despite the time of year, with the Mid-Autumn Festival approaching, the classroom felt stuffy and hot, and the large number of attendees made it feel suffocating. Guzheng felt she might faint if things didn't cool down soon. She decided to leave, but the people behind her were like a solid wall, making it difficult for her to move even a step. Then, suddenly, she hears a voice calling her name. The voice sounded a little strange, as if it came from somewhere unfamiliar. Just as she was at a loss, the voice sounded again. "Guzheng!" Guzheng could tell that the voice was close by. She turned her head towards the sound and saw a boy sitting in a row of seats on the left side. His forehead was bulging slightly, his face a little dark, and his eyes were shining brightly. He stood up, smiled at her, and waved his hand, saying, "Guzheng, come over here. I have a seat for you." Guzheng stared blankly at the unfamiliar yet somehow familiar face, especially those eyes, one single eyelid, one double eyelid, and hesitated to move. "Are you? Don't you remember me? I'm Zhong Tianyi's friend, Wang Sheng." The other person smiled warmly. "We even discussed Biangelin's poetry together." Guzheng's older brother, Zhong Tianyi, was there too. These words suddenly illuminated Wang Cheng, Biangelin, poem, Guzheng's mind. She remembered that a few years ago, when she was still studying at Chuzhou Middle School, her brother had invited her to dine at Zhuzhen Garden. Sitting next to her was none other than Wang Sheng, whom her brother introduced as a top student in the Chinese department of Chuzhou Teachers College. "That time you, your brother, I, and Du Wei," he made gestures as he spoke, "Du Wei, the photographer." Guzheng suddenly remembered that the photographer had taken a picture of her. However, Guzheng also forgot his name. A faint smile appeared on her previously confused face. "So it's you, Wang Cheng." Guzheng emphasized Cheng. She remembered that he had mentioned his name to her before, but at the time, it had slipped her mind. She remembered he had once specifically told her, but time had passed, and she had forgotten. "How'd you end up here?" Guzheng asked, her voice full of surprise. "Oh, I've been accepted into the graduate program in Chinese studies at Dongjiang University," he replied, beaming with pride. As they enjoyed their conversation, the keynote speaker, Lang Tao, took the stage. Although Guzheng had seen Lang Tao in a school newspaper photo before, she was still slightly surprised when she saw him in person. She was sitting pretty close to the platform, so she could see Lang Tao's facial features quite clearly. The bright 1,000-watt incandescent light on the ceiling highlighted Lang Tao's youthful complexion, making his face appear pale. His slightly curly hair added a youthful and gentle feminine charm to his appearance. But this was just a temporary illusion. But in reality, his appearance and demeanor were quite masculine. His eyes, a deep black with a subtle hint of blue, were a bit sunken. His nose was straight, and the lines of his lips were quite soft. And his posture on the podium? Stunning. His left hand rested gently on the podium while his other hand was tucked into his pocket. One leg was slightly bent, while the other stood straight, making his approximately 5 feet 9 inches tall body appear well-proportioned and tall. He wore a blue round-neck t-shirt with a beige casual suit jacket, which he had just taken off when he stepped onto the platform. It was clear that the crowd in the classroom had made him feel a bit warm. He raised his face slightly, showing no signs of nervousness or tension under the crowd's scrutiny. He looked relaxed as he looked around the bustling audience in the classroom. It wasn't just a regular look, but more like gazing down from a mountain, giving him this incredible, world-staring vibe. As he stepped onto the platform, the room, which had been buzzing with activity, suddenly fell silent. Everyone's eyes turned to Lang Tao as if they were all at a concert, waiting for that one star to take the stage. A wave of applause washed over the room, and it was clear that everyone was excited to see what he would do next. A faint smile graced his face as he raised his hands, just like a conductor leading the symphony, pressing downwards with a gentle yet firm gesture. When the applause subsided, the lecture began. Guzheng couldn't recall any lecture he had attended that possessed Lang Tao's formidable presence. He had everyone's attention like a magician, making them laugh, cry, and feel all kinds of emotions. It was like he took a philosophy lecture and turned it into something like a concert or a sports game, something lively and enjoyable. Even the tricky, complex philosophical terms came to life. He skillfully wove in stories, intertwining Heidegger's life experiences with philosophical terms like covering, opening up, uncovering, self, ID, forgotten existence, being born towards death, what does a poet do, and Hölderlin. It was like he had a gift for making even the most complex ideas feel accessible. His lectures were captivating, often leaving the audience with joy and a feeling of learning something new. Guzheng had never taken a philosophy class before. Still, this time she was led by Lang Tao's lectures into a world entirely of wisdom and poetic beauty, to the extent that she forgot everything around herself. Heidegger is actually a scumbag, not a king of philosophy at all, nor is he as noble and great as he makes out to be. Guzheng heard someone murmuring in her ear as the speech transitioned into the Q&A session. Guzheng was surprised, and she turned her head to see the slightly dark face. It was only then that she remembered this brother's friend. Guzheng felt that Wang Sheng's words were a bit confusing, as if hearing a discordant note from a perfect piece of music. She furrowed her brows slightly. 2 girls sitting in the front row also turned their heads and glared at Wang Sheng, but he didn't notice. He was busy writing something quickly. After a little while, he gave Guzheng a note. She took the note and saw a line of scribbled words. Professor Lang. Could you talk about Heidegger's experience of praising fascism and abandoning his loyal female student, Arendt? Guzheng wasn't familiar with the topic Wang Sheng raised, so she wasn't able to respond, but she could tell that Wang Sheng was trying to be provocative. Can you help me pass it up? Wang Sheng pouted a playful challenge in his voice. Guzheng paused for a moment, but still folded the note and handed it to the person in the front row. During the Q&A session, until the host announced the end of the lecture, Lang Tao didn't mention the question from Wang Sheng. He looked pretty disappointed, and his eyes looked a bit sad, one with a single eyelid and the other with a double eyelid. Guzheng was so caught up in looking around the platform for Li Hong that she didn't notice Lang Tao's absence. She was searching for the Li Hong figure bothering Lang Tao during the midterm break, like a new student just entering school. Guzheng followed the crowd dispersing from the venue and walked towards the classroom door, wondering curiously. It's not the literature club hosting today's lecture, so I wondered why Li Hong was busy organizing and bustling around Langtao. The crowd surged in like a tide, quickly separating Guzheng from his brother's friend, Wang Sheng. 4. Xiangchun Street. On a weekend evening, after finishing dinner in the cafeteria, Guzheng was about to study at the library when she ran into Li Hong. Just as she was about to ask about the lecture by Lang Tao that day, Li Hong abruptly asked her, "Have you read the 2 articles in this issue of Langtaosha reviewing Xiangchun Street?" Guzheng said, "I only received the publication 2 days ago and haven't had time to read it yet." Li Hong seemed a bit disappointed, but she was still friendly. She asked, "You must have read Song Xiaofan's novel, right?" Song Xiaofan? Guzheng looked a little puzzled. Song Xiaofan? You don't know him? I'm surprised you're a member of the Langtaosha Literary Club. Li Hong teased, Song Xiaofan's the next big thing in Chinese literature these days. Xiangchun Street is her new work. There were 2 review articles about it. One is a repost from Art News by the famous critic Ye Xiaoyan, and the other is a submission to the club, a sharp criticism of Xiangchun Street. It was written by a Chinese department graduate student with a very sharp writing style that's just as good as Ye Xiaoyan's. Li Hong was very enthusiastic in introducing, "By the way, Xiangchun Street is also published as an appendix in this issue of Langtaosha along with the reviews. If you haven't had a chance to read Xiangchun Street yet, now's a great opportunity to do so." Seeing that Guzheng seemed hesitant, she added, "Song Xiaofan is also in our Chinese department's writers class. Let's go together one day for an interview with her. You'll definitely want to find time to read her work so you're not at a loss for words when the time comes." In a week, Guzheng would have her constitutional law exam. She had her head in the legal books at the moment, so she didn't have time for fiction. But when she caught sight of Li Hong's serious expression, she could only agree, "Okay, I'll go back and read." Langtaosha is the journal of the Langtaosha Literary Club. When it was first published, it was mimeographed. After Li Hong became the literary club president, she took over as the editor-in-chief of Langtaosha and put her heart and soul into it. She managed to get his father to sponsor a sum of money to change Langtaosha to offset printing, and she also implemented bold reforms in terms of content and form. She published the works of her fellow literary club members and welcomed submissions from outside writers, giving the publication a whole new look. Guzheng's Under the Crabapple Tree was published in Langtaosha. After returning to the dormitory from the evening self-study session, Guzheng searched through a pile of books at the head of her bed and pulled out Langtaosha. Before reading the commentary on that piece, she first read the novel Xiangchun Street attached after the commentary. Guzheng was unlike most Chinese literature students because she didn't usually read literary publications. Xiangchun Street was less than 20,000 words, and she finished reading it in one go. The novel tells the sad story of 2 educated young people during the Cultural Revolution, Deng Changjiang and Shi Qin, classmates in middle school. Deng's father was an old cadre who had participated in the Long March and was targeted during the Cultural Revolution. Shi's father was a capitalist who sadly jumped to his death during the Red Guard's criticism and struggle against him during the Cultural Revolution. Despite their different backgrounds, they faced similar challenges, and as they journeyed to the sacred land of Yan'an, a place steeped in revolutionary history, their paths crossed and love blossomed. Later on, they were sent to a remote village for work and settled down. They were such hard workers and great students that they were recognized as model educated youth in the county. Because of that, they were both transferred to teach at Xiangchun Street Public Middle School. Deng Changjiang taught Chinese while Shi Qin taught music. Xiangchun Street was a charming town with just one street lined with Xiangchun trees, Toon trees. Every spring, the trees were full of delicate Xiangchun buds, and the wind carried a sweet scent from the trees. Shortly after Deng Changjiang and Shi Qin married, they had a son named Hongyu. Yao Jian, the principal of Xiangchun Street Middle School, had a thing for Shi Qin, and he'd been eyeing her for a while. So he devised this plan to have Deng Changjiang take his students on a field trip to a farm in the mountains, and he'd use the opportunity to get close to Shiqin. But things didn't go as planned. While Deng Changjiang led the students up the mountain for a fun labor project, he accidentally fell into the Dongjiang River from a cliff. Chen was heartbroken when she lost her husband. Under the persuasion of Yao Jianshe, she eventually married him and had a daughter, Yao Ju. A year later, the heartbroken Chen was overjoyed when Deng Changjiang suddenly returned to Xiangchun Street. It turned out that he had not died after falling into the river from the cliff. He had drifted in the water for many days before being rescued by a kind fisherman. But he had lost his memory, and it wasn't until a year later that he started to remember who he was again. When he returned to Xiangchun Street, he found that Chen had become someone else's wife. This saddened him deeply. He turned to heavy drinking, and one night after getting drunk, he wrote a reactionary slogan on the wall of a restaurant. He was labeled a counter-revolutionary and sentenced to imprisonment. Chen was heartbroken when she learned about what happened to him, and she took her own life by jumping into a well. A few years later, the Gang of Four was broken up, and Deng Changjiang was released from prison and returned to Xiangchun Street. The person had passed away, things had changed, and the two children, Hongyu and Yao Tiao, were nowhere to be found. Deng Changjiang wandered aimlessly on the street, filled with fragrant Chinese Toon trees, feeling lost like a lonely ghost, with a vast emptiness in his heart. The streets were filled with Toon trees and the scent of Toon. The characters and settings in the novel felt like old friends, as if Guzheng had known them from somewhere else. She had a sweet delusion that the protagonist in the story had once appeared in her life. But upon closer inspection, it wasn't quite the same. A familiar stranger. Guzheng's mind conjured up a term commonly used by students majoring in Chinese literature when discussing literary works. Guzheng often had a strange illusion. When arriving at a certain place, meeting a certain person, or experiencing something, it felt like it had happened before or had been dreamed. She thought that maybe the experiences of a person and events could be reoccurred or reproduced in specific circumstances, just like a photocopier. These thoughts often stayed with her, almost like she was slowly losing touch with reality. After a moment of reflection, Guzheng decided to take a break and read the two comments. The first comment was titled, "The Latest Achievements of Scar Literature and Educated Youth Literature." The paragraph was an excerpt from the evaluation of the short story Xiangchun Street by Song Xiaofan. The other article was called Plagiarism or Innovation, Evaluation of Song Xiaofan's new work Xiangchun Street. The two critiques have opposing views, with one praising and the other criticizing. Guzheng was not a Chinese major and had little literary appreciation. After skimming through both articles, she didn't find the first particularly appealing, but the second one caught her eye. The author of the second article clearly stated that Xiangchun Street stays at a superficial moral level, fabricates false and bizarre plots, and behind the delicate and euphemistic narratives and twisted and bizarre stories, it exposes the writer's poverty of thought. Even worse, the storyline of Xiangchun Street was almost a copy of the Soviet novel Return. The author changed the setting from the Soviet Union during the Patriotic War to China in the 1960s and 1970s. However, they've simplified, vulgarized, and conceptualized a complex era, and they've unfortunately lacked a profound grasp of the psychological feelings of the characters. As a result, they've failed to represent the latest achievement of scar literature and youth literature. In essence, it is regrettably a failed work. The article was written sharply and skillfully. Guzheng glanced at the author's name below the title, Wang Sheng, Class of '86 Graduate Student Chinese Department. Wang Sheng, Wang Sheng, Wang Cheng. Guzheng recalled her brother's friend whom she had met at Lang Tao's lecture. One eye with a single eyelid, the other with a double eyelid, and that provocative expression. Could it be him? Guzheng suddenly realized she hadn't returned to Chuzhou and Pijian for 2 years. As this thought crossed her mind, her vision blurred. Chapter 2. 1. Legend of Pai Town. Chuzhou was located at the lower reaches of the Dongjiang East River, about 250 kilometers away from the provincial capital, Dajiang City. It's an ancient city with more than 1,000 years of history. Its recorded history goes back to the pre-Qin period when it was part of the Chu state. The city's many rivers and lakes had earned it the nickname Yunmeng Marsh. Chuzhou has a rich history, with many cultural relics in the city. The city wall, built in the Tang dynasty, was still strong, except for the east and west gates, which sadly fell victim to war during the Republic of China period. Thankfully, the north and south gates had been well preserved. Chuzhou was not only the hometown of the prime minister of the Ming dynasty, Zheng Juren, but it also served as an official post for officials from Shaanxi Bingzhou. Legend had it that while serving as a military officer in Chuzhou, Wu Shiyue stationed his troops and trained them at Pigu Mountain, 50 kilometers away from Chuzhou. He fell in love with a local woman who was as beautiful as Shi, and they had 2 children together, including his second daughter, Ba. She became the only female emperor in Chinese history, a remarkable figure known as Wu Zetian. Pigu Mountain stretches nearly 100 miles from Dongjiang River, meandering like a green dragon along the edge of Pai Town and continuing into the neighboring province of Bezhou, which borders Chuzhou. Until the 1980s, there was no proper road in Pigu Mountain. You had to take a boat from Dongjiang to travel from Chuzhou to Bezhou. If you were trying to get from Chuzhou to Bezhou, it would take at least 3 days, and that's not even counting the rough mountain roads and the wild animals that could make you nervous. Many people saw Pigu Mountain as a remote and untamed wilderness. There was even a saying, "Good girls don't enter Pigu, good men don't become bandits." In the Pigu dialect, bandit refers to a thief. Before 1949, Pigu Mountain was a place where bandits would meet. However, after the People's Republic of China was founded, these bandits were eradicated entirely. Still, some criminals sought refuge in Pigu Mountain to evade legal sanctions. Some of them stayed for years, and when they came out, they found a world that had changed entirely. It's like spending 7 days in the mountains but 1,000 years in the world. History tells us that Pai Town at the northern foot of Mount Paigu was where Wu Shiyue tunneled troops. There's a story going around that when Wu Shiyue was the military commander in Chuzhou, he had an excellent opportunity for promotion. But he turned it down because he was so attached to his wife back home. Instead, he chose to station his troops under the Zigu Mountain, where he maintained peace. He was a deep student of Laozi, with a profound understanding of Taoism. He was also skilled in the art of fasting. A beautiful legend about him says he could go weeks without eating, relying instead on the nourishment of air and dew. This allowed him to reach a deep state of selflessness, where the boundaries between self and nature blurred. He lived a long life and passed away at the end. He was 108 years old, with white hair and a youthful face, looking younger than his daughter, the Empress. Even today, there's a temple called Baishusi below Pigu Mountain, which was said to commemorate the fasting skill of longevity practiced by Wu Shiyue. In addition to Baishusi, Jizhen preserves many historical relics, such as the Wuzhen Well, where Wu Zetian combed her hair in her childhood, and the Zhenggong Temple, where Zheng Juren lived out his last days after being dismissed and returning to Chuzhou. According to the local stories of Chuzhou, when Zheng Juren returned from the capital to Chuzhou, he traveled lightly and did not bring much jewelry or silver. He even dismissed all the servants following him for many years. The only person he brought with him was his beloved concubine, Yunyang. Yunyang was originally a courtesan in the capital and was 28 years old. She was not only beautiful, but she was also skilled at playing the pipa. After Zheng Juren's fortunes at the imperial court changed, he often came to a tea house called Chuyun Xuan. There, he would drink tea and listen to Yunyang play the pipa. The tea house owner was also from Chuzhou, and Yunyang often played Chuzhou tunes there, attracting mainly people from Chuzhou to the tea house. The owner of Chuyun Xuan was surnamed Chu. He had lived in the capital for a long time and had met Zheng Juren, who was a high-ranking official. But Chu never bothered him. Although he was a businessman, Chu had the bearing of a gentleman. Whenever Zheng Juren stopped by the tea house, he would lovingly request that Yunyang play a folk song from Chuzhou called Picking Tea Tune. Yunyang's melody and charm would stir a deep longing in his heart. After working as an official for a long time, Zheng Juren was tired of the political games and dishonesty in the government. He had tried to make changes for a long time, but the rich and powerful families didn't like it. They didn't want things to change. This left him in a tricky spot. Even the kind Emperor Wanli, who had been very supportive at first, started having second thoughts. At his age, Zheng Juren felt his fate was already set in stone. He started thinking about going back to his hometown. When the time came for Zheng Juren to leave his official position and Beijing behind, he noticed that none of his former colleagues or subordinates came to see him off. Only Chu, who had never been close to him, was accompanied by his daughter Yun, who came to see him out of the capital. The north wind was blowing, and the willows in the city were weeping. Before they parted ways, Chu gave Yun, dressed in a simple gray dress, a gentle push in front of Zheng Juren and said, "It's my good fortune to have met you, sir. I have nothing else to offer as a gift, so I'm giving you Yun. The road ahead may be difficult, but you'll be strong and brave. It's better for you to have a companion by your side." With a heart full of gratitude, he bowed and left, his eyes brimming with tears. Zheng Juren returned to his hometown of Chuzhou with his dear maid, Yun, but did not stay long at the Zheng mansion in the city center. One reason was that his two lawful wives made things difficult for Yun, and the other reason was that he could not bear the officiousness and intrigue of the officialdom that extended from the capital city to Chuzhou. In less than half a year, he built a new home for himself under Pigu Mountain, far from Chuzhou, and moved in with Yun, leaving the Zheng mansion behind. 8 years later, Zheng Juren passed away at the age of 69 due to illness. His children then moved his body back to Chuzhou for burial. Shortly after, Yun also passed away and was buried at the foot of Pigu Mountain. According to her last wish, only a simple tombstone with no name or inscription was erected for her. The small pie town, nestled in a remote and secluded place, was a place of humanistic charm that captivated some unexpected visitors. The town's cultural landscape was unique and also possessed a great deal of natural beauty. You'll find vast bamboo forests on Pigu Mountain and dozens of other trees like ginkgo, Chinese Toon, Chinese mahogany, metasequoia, boxwood, and more. At the foot of the mountain, to the east of Pie Town, stood an ancient ginkgo tree that was nearly 100 feet tall, with a trunk that 3 people could not encircle. This incredible tree was said to be over 800 years old. Everyone in Pie Town knows a beautiful story about this ginkgo tree. During the Republic of China period, the Kuomintang's regular army and militia forces attacked the Pigu Mountain Soviet area. They captured the dozen or so Red Army soldiers there and took them to the ginkgo tree, where they were executed. The Red Army soldiers, with quiet dignity, sang the Internationale as their final act of defiance. Before the song ended, the guns fired, and rows of bullets pierced the bodies of the Red Army soldiers and entered the sturdy trunk of the ancient ginkgo tree. After 1949, the people of Pie Town affectionately named this ginkgo tree the Red Army tree. Even today, you could still see bullet holes the size of copper coins on the tree. In Pie Town, the most common tree was not the Niangzi hair tree, but the Chinese Toon tree. If you're a visitor from out of town and arrive in Pie Town for the first time, you'll be amazed by the graceful Chinese Toon trees lining the streets and the refreshing fragrance that wafts through the air. You would find yourself genuinely falling in love with this place, even wanting to stay and never leave. Back in 1966, 2 young folks from other places strolled from Chuzhou City to Pie Town. As soon as they stepped into the town, they were immediately captivated by the enchanting scent of Toon filling the air. These 2 young people, a boy and a girl, were part of a group called the Red Guards. In 1966, many Red Guards came to Pie Town. Some of them hailed from the capital city of Beijing, some from the provincial capital of Dajiang City, and some from the bustling city of Chuzhou. They came in waves, forming a vast and endless procession. They wore grass-green military uniforms and carried white towels tied to their bags. They marched in a neat formation, singing loud and clear military songs. The Pie Town folks had seen People's Liberation Army soldiers in movies, and they could see that these Red Guards looked just like them. The only difference was that the Red Guards didn't have the cap badges or collar insignia the soldiers wore. The town government organized residents and students from Pie Town Primary School to line up on the street to welcome them, shouting slogans such as "Learn from the Red Guards" and "Pay tribute to the Red Guards," as well as "Carry the great proletarian cultural revolution to the end." The Red Guards waved to the welcoming crowd while shouting, "Learn from the people of Pie Town and pay tribute to the people of Pie Town." Their cheers filled the sky, creating a joyful atmosphere. During the summer heat, some residents joyfully imitated movie scenes to welcome the People's Liberation Army. They carried water bottles and delicious homemade sour plum soup to offer to the young Red Guards. A special reception station had been set up in the town, where the Red Guard youths were accommodated in the classrooms of Pie Town Elementary School, which had already started its summer vacation. The community had prepared food and drinks, ensuring the Red Guards were well cared for. After enjoying their meals, the Red Guard youths kindly offered to pay, saying they wanted to learn from the PLA and not take anything from the people. When the residents refused to accept payment, the youths sing the 3 main disciplines and 8 points for attention, repeatedly. From "all actions must follow commands," to "no looting or taking prisoners," and then to "wholeheartedly support and welcome nationwide." After a good night's rest and a hearty meal, the Red Guard youths start causing a bit of mischief in the town. They begin by breaking into the abandoned Guandi Temple in the western part of the town. Then they publicly criticize and parade a former deputy mayor who was recently dismissed. They then pay their respects at the Red Army tree, raising their fists towards the towering ancient ginkgo tree, solemnly pledging, "To protect our beloved land and honor the sacrifices of the martyrs, we must answer the call of our beloved leader, Chairman Mao. Together, we must overthrow the capitalist leaders and ensure that their dreams never again rise above our own." The Red Guard youths then walk through the streets and alleys, visiting schools, factories, and residents' homes. They perform revolutionary cultural programs, deliver speeches on the righteousness of the revolution, and call on everyone to unite against the capitalist roaders. Whenever this happens, the streets are bustling with crowds, livelier than during the Spring Festival. The most memorable characters from the cultural program of the Red Guards in Pie Town were a pair of male and female Red Guards. The man was quite handsome, tall and slender, with striking blue eyes hinting at a foreign influence. His slightly upturned chin gave his round face a touch of femininity. His face had a rugged look and a slightly arrogant, wild vibe. The woman was slender, with eyebrows like willow leaves and a face like a full moon, resembling a star who had stepped out of a painting. She had a subtle mole under her left eye, barely noticeable. Still, sharp-eyed folks immediately noticed it and pointed out it was a beauty mark, suggesting that a woman with such a mole would be gorgeous. However, some people disagreed, believing it was not a beauty mark but a tear mark, suggesting that a woman with such a mole might have a difficult life filled with tears. As everyone shared their thoughts, the performance began. The man sang "We Were Chairman Mao's Red Guards" with a deep and resonant voice, making the melody even more distant and desolate. The woman accompanied him with an instrument that most people in Pie Town had never seen before. It was a Guzheng, as a music teacher from the town's elementary school recognized. Then the woman sang a song called Liu Yang River, with the man accompanying her on a flute. Her voice was like a gentle breeze, clear and sweet, and together with the flute, she sang this Hunan folk song with such deep emotions that it touched everyone's heart. The man, who seemed a few years older, appeared more mature, but their performance was so in sync that it seemed like they were one person. Some women in the audience couldn't help but wonder, could these 2 Red Guards be a couple? And lo and behold, they were right. These 2 Red Guards were a real-life couple. The man was Zhang Xiaotian, a young teacher at Dongjiang University, and the woman was Gu Ying, a student in the art department of Dongjiang University. 2. Blue Flames. Zhong Xiaotian and Gu Ying met each other at a cultural performance. Dongjiang University presented a modern ballet, The White-Haired Girl, at the Provincial Youth Art Performance. The performers were carefully selected from among young teachers and university students. Zhong Xiaotian, a student of the 63rd class of the art department at Dongjiang University, became a teacher in the Department of Art Research after graduation, and mainly taught Western art history courses. Gu Ying, a junior majoring in folk music in the art department, was also selected, and both of them joined the cast of The White-Haired Girl. Gu Ying played Xie, and Zhong Xiaotian played the leading role, Da Chun. Gu Ying's parents hail from Shanghai. Back in the early 1950s, they answered the national call to support border construction and worked at a big steel plant in the Northwest. They were later transferred to the newly established Dongjiang Iron and Steel Plant in the 1960s. Her father was an engineer, and her mother taught music at a school for children of factory workers. Gu Ying was not only naturally beautiful and looked like her mother, but she also had her mother's musical talent. She's been a natural at singing and dancing since she was a kid, and her artistic talent was evident. Although her mother was only a music teacher at a school for children of factory workers, she had always loved art. She dreamed of becoming an artist in her youth, but life had other plans. She ended up becoming a primary school teacher, but that didn't stop her from pouring all her energy into Gu Ying's growth. When Gu Ying was in junior high, she was sent to the junior ballet team at the Workers' Cultural Palace in the city. The teachers were famous actors from the city's song and dance theater. Her mother had always nurtured the dream that Gu Ying would become a ballet dancer when she grew up. But then, Gu Ying accidentally hurt her ankle during practice, ending her dreams. But her mom was still hopeful, encouraging her to apply to the Department of Art at Dongjiang University when she completed her college application. Dongjiang University was a nationally recognized institution, and its Department of Art was a well-known center for art education and training. Many of the school's graduates became choreographers and performers in professional art groups. So, when Gu Ying got accepted into the Department of Art at Dongjiang University, it was like her mother's dreams came true. Gu Ying once heard Zhong Xiaotian talk about the history of Western art, and she was captivated. His father, Song Qiankun, was the deputy governor of Dongjiang province, and his mother was an international friend who joined the Chinese Revolution very early. This unique and privileged background might seem a bit mysterious to college students. Zhong Xiaotian's father's surname was Song, but his own surname was Zhong, which was a bit confusing to people. Gu Ying never imagined that she and Zhong Xiaotian would star together in the ballet White-Haired Girl one day. During the White-Haired Girl production, rehearsals were intense, but the cast didn't have much time to bond outside of that. Zhong Xiaotian was a versatile guy. He could play the guitar and had a good voice. He was kind and thoughtful, but he could be a bit reserved. Zhong Xiaotian's family lived in the city, but he rarely went home. Whether weekends or holidays, he stayed at school like students whose families were out of town, as if his home wasn't even in the city. Gu Ying was curious about this. The summer of 1966 arrived earlier than usual. As soon as May hit, the weather turned hot, with temperatures soaring from around 20 degrees Celsius to over 30 degrees Celsius. The cicadas on the campus became increasingly dense with each passing day. The number of people reading aloud on the outdoor hillsides and in the woods gradually increased. Every morning before dawn, students running on the oval track on the playground would crowd the track to capacity. Almost overnight, the college students traded their spring attire for skirts or short-sleeved shirts. The vibrant and lively energy of the college students, especially the girls, brought a joyful and thriving atmosphere to the campus. On a mid-May weekend, the White-Haired Girl cast rehearsed as usual in the gymnasium. That day, they were rehearsing the scene where the protagonist, Wang Dachun, searches for Xie, who had turned into the white-haired fairy, at the mountain god temple. The two had a double ballet which was quite challenging, but they worked hard and did their best. Gu Ying and Zhang Xiaotian had practiced many times but couldn't get past the director. The director, a guest from the City Opera and Dance Theater surnamed Yu, had an impressive background. He had graduated from the Central Ballet over 30 years ago, and his long hair was combed into a ponytail. As he walked, the braid in the back flapped around, giving him a feminine look. He had played the male lead in Swan Lake and had even studied at the Soviet Union National Ballet Theater for half a year. Whether the whole play could succeed or not depends on Jir and Dachun. If you two misbehave, the whole play will be smashed, and everyone will follow you to the end. Every time he said the play, Director Yu always flipped over and over again this sentence, which sounded more like a threat than encouragement. Gu Ying's injured ankle began to ache. Once, while Director Yu was in the bathroom, Zhang Xiaotian wiped the sweat off his forehead with the back of his hand and whispered to Gu Ying, "Every time that ponytail says this, I wish I could slap him or pull that ugly ponytail off." Behind the scenes, the students in the theater group lovingly called Director Yu Ponytail. After rehearsing together for so long, Gu Ying realized for the first time that Zhang Xiaotian was quite cute when he was naughty like a big boy. At that moment, the loudspeaker outside the gymnasium began broadcasting a central document. The announcer's voice was a bit firmer than usual, and he spoke in a serious and formal tone. The school radio station played this document over and over all day long. Gu Ying later learned that it was the famous May 16th notice. From that day on, the normally quiet campus was abuzz with activity. In just a few days, the newspaper column in front of the school cafeteria, the publicity windows of the student dormitories, the entrance of each department, and even the school's administrative building were all covered with big character posters. Some famous professors and school leaders were treated as reactionary academic authorities and capitalist authorities, becoming objects of criticism, and became the target of criticism by the big character posters. Soon, all departments established student rebel organizations of varying sizes. Initially, these organizations were scattered, each with its own distinct political platform and ideas. The situation was very chaotic. Gradually, they joined forces and established a larger rebel core. From the school to the outside, the struggle shifted from writing large print to significant debate and gradually moved to demonstrations and open criticism. It's essential to note that as the battle evolved, it shifted from writing large character posters and engaging in debates to more violent forms, including demonstrations, holding criticism meetings, and organizing workers' strikes. Schools were closed, and the administrative and teaching work was almost paralyzed. Even rehearsals for the cast and crew of White-Haired Girl had to stop. No one could give instructions, nor could anyone follow them. Many of the students in the cast returned to their respective departments to participate in the movement, and the number of people rehearsing decreased. Soon, the ponytailed director also left without saying goodbye and returned to the City Opera and Dance Drama Theater, leaving the troupe leaderless and on the brink of dissolution. Gu Ying had never been interested in politics. Since classes had been put on hold, she had been doing that dance in the gym that she could never seem to get right. The gym was vast and empty, except for Gu Ying. She faced a large mirror and tried to remember the dance moves. Remember, you're not just moving your body, you're also channeling someone else's emotions. The voice of director Ma Weibian reminded her of this. As she practiced, she started to feel like the world in the mirror was real, while the world outside felt like an illusion, including herself. She reached out to touch herself in the mirror, but what she touched was a cold mirror. She stood on one toe, the classic golden chicken independent posture in ballet, but the center of gravity of her body tilted towards the mirror as if she were going to get into the mirror. At this moment, Gu Ying's injured ankle started to hurt violently again, and her mind was spinning. But just as she was about to take a tumble, a kind pair of hands grabbed her, saving her from a fall. She saw Zhang Xiaotian staring at her intently when she opened her eyes. His eyes were as blue as the most transparent, pristine sky or the most straightforward, transparent lake water. But no, those eyes were like two fiery flames, and she felt like she was about to be set ablaze by those two blue flames. She felt a moan escape her lips, a mixture of desire and fear. Since that day, Gu Ying and Zong Xiaotian became a couple, of course, in secret. They lived in a collective dormitory and used the gym rehearsal hall as their principal meeting place. For days and nights on end, the two of them would quietly slip into the rehearsal hall through a loose window in the gym. This became their little slice of paradise, a place where they could be alone. They'd often stay there until the middle of the night, lost in their own world. One day, Gu Ying fell asleep and woke up to find Zong Xiaotian sitting beside her, hands on his knees, staring blankly out of the window with his blue eyes looking a bit melancholic. Gu Ying sat up and she embraced him from behind, softly asking, "Darling, what's wrong?" Zong Xiaotian didn't say a word and simply stared out the window. The window showed an endless expanse of darkness. Gu Ying wondered what he was thinking. Gu Ying felt a pang of concern. She remembered a piece of news she had read in the newspaper that day. Revolutionary masses in Dongjiang province held a conference to denounce the traitor and internal spy Song Qiankun. The three words Song Qiankun were marked with 3 black crosses. Instantly, a prominent member of the Red Second Generation had become a member of the Black Fifth category. It's easy to imagine how Zong Xiaotian must have felt. Gu Ying buried her face in his neck, asking, "Dear, is it because of your father?" Zong Xiaotian's body trembled. "No, he's not my father." He quickly and gently pulled Gu Ying's hand away and spun around, and in the dim light his eyes glowed like 2 flames. "He's just my stepfather. Besides, my mother and he have long been divorced." "Then where is your biological father?" Gu Ying looked at him in surprise, as if she didn't recognize him. "He was also a big shot, a traitor," Zong Xiaotian sneered. "He's dead now. I never had the chance to meet him. Some say he's dead, while others say he's still alive. But to me, it didn't matter. After I was born, I took my stepfather's surname, Song, and became Songjae. My mother only changed her surname to Zong after divorcing my stepfather." Gu Ying was taken aback, thinking that he was delirious due to some stimulus. "I don't believe it. Could it be that your mother married 2 traitors?" "That's just how it is," Zong Xiaotian replied, turning his face towards the window again, his gaze fixed on the dark night outside. "Sometimes I really want to just jump into the darkness, like a drop of water disappearing in the water." He spoke thoughtfully, each word like a pearl, as if he were reciting poetry. He looked puzzled, even desperate. "Love is all there is. Love is the only thing that can make me forget all my shame." He looked so sad, lonely, raising his hands in the air like a frail and helpless child, as if praying for help. "Darling, do you know? Revolution has turned me into a suspicious hybrid. I am afraid of revolution," he shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. "I just want to find a little corner of paradise to call my own. I want to let go of who I am, where I come from, and where I'm going." Gu Ying felt a deep sense of compassion for him and wrapped his arms around Zong Xiaotian. That day, they spent the whole night in the gymnasium until the sun came up, and then they left. 3. Purple-tiled roof, Toon tree, and attic. For a long time, the people of Pai Town had promoted the settling of those 2 red guards in the town as one of the significant achievements of the Cultural Revolution. They included it in the Chronicle of Major Events in the local chronicles of Pai Town. In May 1967, young teacher Zong Xiaotian from Dongjiang University and college student Gu Ying responded to Chairman Mao's call for educated youth to support farmers in the countryside. They requested to be assigned to the Pigu People's Commune to serve as a Pai Town primary school teacher, later transferring to Pai Town Middle School. The following items were also listed as important achievements. In August 1967, after 2 years of hard work by the many commune members, the Chupi Highway was finished and opened to traffic. This marked the end of a period when no roads connected Pigu Mountain to Chuzhou and the provincial capital, Dajiang City. In January 1968, Pai Town's first senior high school, Pai Town Middle School, was established, marking the end of Pai Town's history of having only primary schools and no middle schools. In September 1970, a modern brick and tile factory was established at the foot of the Paigu Mountain. The first factory director and chairman of the Revolutionary Committee was Wang Shengli, a disabled revolutionary soldier. Before this, over 3/4 of the houses in the Peigu commune were built with adobe and thatched grass. But thanks to the brick and tile factory, things started to change. Within just 3 years, most of the farmhouses in the Peigu commune were converted into spacious and impressive brick and tile houses, significantly improving the living standards of the people. The newly established Pai Town Middle School was in dire need of teachers, and both Zhang Xiaotian and Gu Ying were transferred to the school. At that time, apart from a row of newly completed classrooms, Pai Town Middle School did not even have a decent dormitory for teachers. So Zhang Xiaotian and Gu Ying still lived in their old primary school dormitory. Pai Town Primary School was lovingly expanded from the former Zheng Mansion, which was originally a private residence built by Zheng Juren, a prime minister of the Ming Dynasty, after he retired from office. This was a lovely Ming Dynasty-style courtyard. Although the main buildings had been damaged over time, the remaining row of purple-tiled houses, the half-moon arched gate beside the pond, and the ivy-covered pavilion behind it still reveal the lingering charm of late Ming Dynasty courtyard architecture. The houses, painted in a vibrant purple, had walls and floors made of blue bricks on all sides. The walls were lined with ancient bronze-colored namu and pine boards, creating a cozy and inviting atmosphere. The eaves of the front and back houses were adorned with intricate carvings of lions, flying dragons, and a variety of birds and beasts. Despite their age, these carvings still retain their vibrant colors. It's said that this row of purple-tiled houses was where Zheng Juren studied, received guests, and enjoyed tea. The pavilion behind the pond was built for Yunyang, the concubine he brought from the capital. In her daily life, Yunyang would accompany Zheng Juren, embroider on the pavilion, and play the guqin. After Zheng Juren's passing, it is said that Yunyang remained in the pavilion, and she passed away there in a state of deep sadness. Unfortunately, a fire during the Tongji period of the Qing dynasty almost reduced the pavilion to ashes, leaving only a half-collapsed tower. Because of this, no one knows exactly what the inside of the pavilion looked like or what furniture was there. Back in the early 1950s, when the People's Government of Peigu District was just getting started, the district office used the purple-tiled houses for a while, but they moved out not too long after to make room for the newly built Pai Town Primary School. In the early 1960s, after the new teaching and office buildings were finished, the purple-tiled houses were used as dormitories for the teaching staff. Not long after Zhang Xiaotian and Gu Ying started working at Pai Town Primary School, they got married. The school kindly provided them with a room, complete with a purple-tiled roof, to make their new home. While it was just one room, it offered a cozy space of around 30 square meters, which could be easily split into 2 smaller rooms. One room became a cozy bedroom, while the other was transformed into a warm living room, dining room, and study. The corridor was spacious, and with the addition of a wooden partition, it transformed into a cozy kitchen. Despite being a bit small, life was very convenient. Right next to the door was a pond with clear water that was just perfect for drinking. Back then, the town hadn't been connected to the tap yet, so the school cafeteria and married faculty members relied on the pond's water for cooking and washing. If the wok were about to smoke, the housewife would calmly go to the pond in front of the door, scoop up a ladle of water and pour it into the wok, making a swishing sound. After Zhang Xiaotian and Gu Ying transferred to the newly established middle school, they still lived in the purple-tiled primary schoolhouse. At this time, the couple had given birth to their son, Zhang Tianyi. For Gu Ying, it was her life's sweetest and happiest time. Zhang Xiaotian taught Chinese language classes in the second year of high school, while Gu Ying taught music classes in the senior year. The middle school was just a stone's throw away from the primary school, making it easy for them to walk to class. Every morning after breakfast, the loving couple would send their son to the nursery next to the primary school, then cross the small street with its green flagstones to attend or prepare classes at the middle school across the street. At noon, they'd have lunch at the cafeteria. In the afternoon, Guzheng would have some free time. She would tidy up the house, prepare dinner, and then pick up their son from the nursery. At that time, Zhang Xiaotian would also come home with textbooks and teaching aids covered in chalk dust. After dinner, the couple would take their toddler son for a walk on the street. At this time, the busy town of Pai Town had calmed down, and the narrow streets were empty and a bit lonely. The green flagstones, just watered, were spotless and smooth like a mirror. The camphor trees on both sides of the street, after being exposed to the sun all day, swayed their branches in the wind like a group of dancing girls. The air felt as fresh as if it had just been washed with water. Guzheng always felt like singing, and she especially loved the idea of Zhang Xiaotian joining in. She sang Evening Outside Moscow, and Zhang Xiaotian sang In That Distant Place. Both songs were their favorites, and they still accompanied each other, just as they had when they first arrived in Pai Town as Red Guards. Guzheng played the guzheng, and Zhang Xiaotian played the flute or guitar. The scene of Guzheng and Zhang Xiaotian's family of 3 taking a walk under the Toon tree in the evening had long been a beautiful sight in the hearts of the people of Pai Town. Guzheng sees Pai Town as a place that's so charming and untouched, like a perfect piece of white jade, stunningly beautiful. She loved this place, cherished this life far from the hustle and bustle, and was free from worldly concerns. It's the perfect place she's always wished for. She's sure that Zhang Xiaotian feels the same way. She's also sure that she loves this man and that he loves her too. How else could they have coincidentally chosen to settle down in this remote town? Guzheng had always been a bit of a homebody. Shortly after her birth, her parents left for the newly established steel mill in the northwest to support the construction of New China, so her kind grandmother raised her. Her grandmother's home was tucked away in an alleyway called Hongzhen Old Street in the heart of the Hongkou district, Shanghai. Nearby, there's a bustling vegetable market where her grandmother selling braised eggs. Every day, she got up before the sun to make the braised eggs, then pushed a handcart to the market to sell. She left Guzheng, who had just turned 1 year old, alone in the attic, often for half a day until her grandmother returned from selling the braised eggs. On the attic's roof was a square, bright tile. On a clear day, the sky and white clouds could be seen through this tile, while on windy and rainy days, dark clouds rolled by and thunder and lightning flashed. For little Guzheng, this was her entire world. She knew the world was vast and mysterious, and people's lives were tiny, just like the attic where she lived. It's no surprise, then, that Guzheng's sentimental personality developed in this way. It was 3 years before Guzheng's parents returned to Shanghai from the northwest for the first time to visit relatives. When Guzheng saw them, she couldn't recognize her parents. After that, they returned to Shanghai every other year to visit relatives, staying for a maximum of 10 days or half a month before heading back to the northwest. They were always on the go, and it wasn't until much later that Guzheng was able to develop that close-knit bond with her parents. It wasn't until she was about to graduate from primary school that her parents transferred from the northwest to the Dongjiang iron and steel plant, bringing her along, and the family was finally reunited. But by then, her grandmother had already passed away. It's as if her mother were trying to make up for not paying as much attention to her daughter in the past. She showered Guzheng with love and attention, dedicating most of her time and energy to her daughter, except when she was at work. Guzheng felt overwhelmed by the attention, and it made her uncomfortable. However, even so, Guzheng's quiet and thoughtful personality, which she'd developed in her childhood, remained unchanged until she went off to college. Guzheng's life took an unexpected turn during her college years when she stumbled upon Zhang Ailing's novels, Half a Lifetime, Love in a Fallen City, and Red Rose, White Rose in the library. It was like she'd finally found someone who understood her. A petite woman who also preferred tranquility and peace in a chaotic time. But at the same time, She felt overwhelmed by the enormity of the times, and it seemed like everyone and everything was tiny, like specks of dust in a vast room. Sometimes she even envied her parents, who had the courage to make unwavering choices for the greater good, a feat that was no easy task. On the other hand, she felt powerless to join the chariot of the era and could only settle in a corner, living her own small life. Guzheng thought. Guzheng's faith guided her decision to choose Paitown and Zhang Xiaotian as her love interest. This belief was so important to her that it led her to leave her parents, especially her mother, who had always hoped she would become an artist. Since moving to Paitown, Guzheng had never contacted her parents again. She wrote letters to them, but they never replied. Guzheng never regretted her choice. But then one day something happened that made her start to question everything. The source of this shake came from the man beside her, Zhang Xiaotian. 4. The man in the mirror. It all started on that summer weekend. As usual, Guzheng arrived home early and tidied up the house. She was too rushed to tidy up before leaving for work in the morning, so it was finally nice to take some time for herself. She mopped up the water stains on the cement floor that her son, Zhang Tianyi, had created the night before, and watered the 2 pots of somewhat wilted orchid grass under the porch eaves. She scooped the water from the pond outside the door. While watering, she spotted a tiny tadpole about the size of a grain of rice, bobbing around with its adorable tail peeking out. She turned back, poured the water and the tadpole back into the pond, and scooped another ladle of water. After taking care of the flowers, she closed the door and went to pick up her son from the nursery. The nursery was right next to the elementary school, just a quick turn away from the school gate. After picking up her son, Guzheng let him play with building blocks in the room while she went to the kitchen under the eaves to cook. Since it was the weekend, Guzheng stopped by the vegetable market on her way back from class to buy some pork and asparagus. A kind vegetable farmer picked the asparagus from the Paigu mountain. Zhang Xiaotian was absolutely delighted in the simple pleasure of stir-fried pork with asparagus. Not long after, dinner was ready. Guzheng was natural and graceful in her movements, like flowing clouds and running water. Over the years, this young college student from the city had been trained into a competent and capable housewife. As she gracefully removed her apron from her waist and hung it on the eaves, she couldn't help but glance at her watch. It was a beautiful flower-shaped watch, a gift from her husband on their wedding day. And it was a little earlier than usual. Zhang Xiaotian's last class on the weekend ended at 5:45. With the time he needed to return to the office to store teaching aids and the time it took to get home from school, it'd take at most 15 minutes. That meant that Zhang Xiaotian's figure would be at the door in 5 minutes, and the weekend dinner for the family of 3 could begin. But despite the anticipation, 5 minutes, half an hour, or even almost an hour later, Zhang Xiaotian's figure still hadn't appeared. It was already dark, and the other households in the purple-tiled house had turned on their electric lights. The bright lights from the door cast dappled shadows, illuminating the pond in front of the purple-tiled house like a floor strewn with silver coins. Suddenly, the son knocked down the blocks piled up like a hill and cried, "Mom, I'm hungry. Where is Dad? He hasn't come back yet." Guzheng felt her patience being tested. She turned on the lights in the room, served her son a bowl of rice, and coaxed him to eat a few bites. Then she left the house, heading straight for the middle school next door. She walked a bit slowly, her thoughts drifting to her son. She was pregnant again then, and had been carrying the baby for more than 3 months. It was long past school time, and the middle school campus was empty, not a single person in sight. Guzheng didn't often come to the campus this late. She felt a bit nervous, as if she was worried something might happen. She went to the second-year students' classroom, where Zhang Xiaotian was their teacher. The classroom doors were all closed, not a single light was visible, and it was pitch black. There was no sound at all. She paused momentarily, then walked over to the teacher's office near the playground. It was a 1-story building with red bricks and gray tiles. It was a place where all the school's teachers would come together to prepare lessons and review homework. Guzheng's music, physical education, and art teaching and research office was just a hop, skip, and a jump away from Zhang Xiaotian's Chinese teaching and research office. Still, Gu Ying never went to her husband's office to avoid gossip. Gu Ying stood at the entrance outside the Chinese teaching and research office and vaguely saw the door tightly closed. She stood there for about half a minute, torn between going in and leaving, when she suddenly heard a rustling sound and heavy breathing coming from inside. She hesitated for a moment, then reached out to gently push the door open. At the same time, she flipped the switch to turn on the light beside the door. The light flashed on, illuminating the classroom completely, exposing two naked men and women on the podium to the light. The two men and women were still hugging each other tightly because they were so surprised. The woman lifted her face, her back against the blackboard, while the man had his back to the classroom door, burying his face in the woman's chest. The woman's snow-white thighs wrapped around his back like vines, making the whole scene resemble a monster. This scene, reminiscent of a movie, froze before Gu Ying's eyes. She recognized the man as her husband, Zhang Xiaotian, and the woman as Sun Nina, a petite and plump girl with a round face who had just graduated from Chuzhou Teachers College and been assigned to the Chinese language teaching and research office at Pai Town Middle School. Gu Ying was stunned, standing at the classroom door with her eyes wide open, as if she'd been struck by lightning. By the time the two young people reacted, Gu Ying had already turned around and stumbled away from the classroom door. It was as if a mirror in Gu Ying's life had shattered into 1,000 shards, all at once. When Gu Ying was young, her parents brought her a heart-shaped mirror the size of a palm when they returned to Shanghai from Xinjiang. She treated it like a treasure and couldn't bear to part with it. Every day she would hold the mirror and admire herself endlessly. One day she accidentally dropped it on the ground and it broke into several pieces. Looking at the pieces of glass on the ground, she cried her eyes out until her mother taped the mirror back together. It was at that moment, with a warm smile spreading across her face, that she felt the pain subside. The gymnasium of Dongjiang University also had a mirror as big as a wall. When Gu Ying was in the cast of the white-haired girl, she often found herself lost in thought in front of the mirror. It seemed as if the beautiful face and graceful figure reflected in the mirror belonged to a stranger, not herself. Gu Ying and Zhang Xiaotian's first time together in the gymnasium was an intimate moment, and it took place in front of that same mirror. She was overwhelmed by the intensity of Zhang Xiaotian's passion, and at the same time captivated by her own reflection in the mirror. That summer, Gu Ying and Zhang Xiaotian shared many intimate moments in the gymnasium. They would sneak in during rehearsals. Zhang Xiaotian spread his clothes on the floor, and the two of them lay down on them. The floor was made of painted cement, and their knees and elbows were worn down from all the times they'd been there. Zhang Xiaotian was not only vigorous and passionate in bed, but also had a variety of positions, lying down, standing, prone, squatting, more complex than ballet movements. Gu Ying's favorite position, though, was to lean against the wall. Zhang Xiaotian asked her to lean against the wall and hug her from the front. One time, Zhang Xiaotian carried Gu Ying to a big mirror and asked her to face it, her hands on the smooth surface and her hips raised high. Gu Ying saw from the mirror that Zhang Xiaotian's posture and expression were like a fierce beast coming down from the mountain, as if he were going to devour her alive. When they reached a climax, Zhang Xiaotian suddenly let out a loud cry. At that moment, Gu Ying saw Zhang Xiaotian's handsome face looking a bit wild in the mirror, and his blue eyes were like two fiery flames, making him look like a wild beast. Gu Ying was confused, wondering if her love for Zhang Xiaotian was rooted in his amazing sexual talents. Gu Ying was a little puzzled about where he learned his lovemaking skills. Then one day he pulled out an illustrated edition of Jin Ping Mei from the Qing dynasty. She was shocked when she saw the book, bound with thread and wrapped in craft paper. "This is a banned book under the communist regime. Where did you get it?" Zhang Xiaotian's answer surprised him. "Where else could it be? I stole it from Old Song." He always called his former stepfather Song Qiangkun Old Song. Gu Ying was a bit doubtful, though. "Deputy Governor Song, Old Song also has this hobby?" Zhang Xiaotian laughed gently, saying, "Look at how you say that. Do you think leaders only give speeches and don't know how to fuck? Guzheng felt her cheeks flush at the use of such a blunt word. Zhang Xiaotian then shared with her the story of how he had once caught his mother and stepfather, Song Qiankun, having an affair when he was a child. Every time I got up in the middle of the night to urinate, I had to pass by my mother and stepfather's bedroom. One time, when I came back from the toilet, I suddenly heard my mother's cries coming from their bedroom. The cries were rapid and sharp, sounding very terrifying. I was confused and didn't know what was happening. I thought maybe my stepfather was beating my mother again. I remember being a kid and seeing them fight, and sometimes it would even get so bad that they'd end up bloody. So, my first reaction was to gently push open the door and rush into their bedroom. But when I turned on the light, I saw something completely different from what I had imagined. My stepfather and mother were both naked and hugging each other. My mother's blonde hair covered half of her body, while my stepfather's body was completely exposed. This unexpected scene took me aback. "Song Jae, what were you doing here?" my stepfather yelled, his voice full of concern. He jumped out of bed, completely naked, and waved his hand in my direction. My stepfather had beaten me more than once, and every time, my mother protected me like a mother hen protecting her chick. I turned around, startled, and ran out of the bedroom. I heard my mother's voice calling out to me, "Old Song, stop chasing!" Then the bedroom door slammed shut behind me. My stepfather always kept this Jin Ping Mei beside him when he made love to my mother, following the illustrations in the book. Later, when my mother divorced him, I snuck this book. Zhang Xiaotian said this with a playful smirk and a touch of mischief in his eyes. Guzheng felt a bit uneasy, but Zhang Xiaotian's strong body pressed against hers again before she could think further. When Guzheng and Zhang Xiaotian got married, their furniture was very simple, and there wasn't even a decent dressing table. However, Zhang Xiaotian took advantage of a business trip to buy a mirror as tall as a person in a large shopping mall in Chuzhou. He placed it in their purple-tiled house's narrow, simple bedroom, and it looked a bit out of place, almost extravagant. Guzheng didn't say a word. Instead, she lovingly wiped the mirror several times with a towel until it shone brightly. The mirror was a precious keepsake in her heart, symbolizing her love with Zhang Xiaotian. She believed that her husband felt the same way. But now, this mirror suddenly shattered, without any warning, shattering more thoroughly than the small mirror that Guzheng had broken as a child. She realized that Zhang Xiaotian, whom she had always loved dearly, felt so distant now, as if he were someone completely unfamiliar. She felt betrayed, not by anyone, but by herself. She remembered the night in the middle school teaching and research office when Zhang Xiaotian and Sun Nina were leaning against the wall, naked and tightly embraced like two monsters. It was just like the scene where she and Zhang Xiaotian were making love in the gymnasium of Dongjiang University. From that day on, Guzheng and Zhang Xiaotian lived separately. They didn't make a big fuss or create drama, which was really sweet because many couples in Pi Town did that when something like this happened. But these two? They were nothing like that. Guzheng stopped talking to Zhang Xiaotian and avoided looking at him. Zhang Xiaotian returned home after what happened that day, but when he went to school early the next morning, he took some clothes and daily necessities with him and never returned home again. It's hard to say whether he felt ashamed to face his wife or not. Guzheng knew he was living in a single dormitory at school, which the school had originally assigned to them. At first, Guzheng thought Zhang Xiaotian was ashamed of his behavior and wanted to stay alone for some time to reflect, and she still held a glimmer of hope. She couldn't clearly say whether she still loved Zhang Xiaotian, but she believed that she would forgive him if he came home and apologized sincerely. They could then restart their life as if nothing had happened. She was willing to do this not just for the second child in her belly, but for the Zhang Xiaotian she had met at Dongjiang University, and of course for her first love. In reality, Zhang Xiaotian was the only man she had ever loved. Guzheng waited silently. Every night she'd wipe the mirror clean and gaze at her face, slightly swollen from her pregnancy, with a warm smile. During the day, she would sometimes see Zhang Xiaotian coming out of the single dormitory at school, carrying textbooks and chalk boxes to class, standing tall as usual, his handsome face slightly raised with a proud and arrogant expression as if nothing had ever happened. Gu Ying felt a surge of unidentified anger. She couldn't understand why he was so confident. Was it because he was the son of a high-ranking cadre? Gu Ying felt her feelings had been desecrated. She thought back to all the special moments she'd shared with Zhang Xiaotian, including his playful and enthusiastic approach to intimacy. At that moment, Gu Ying realized that she didn't actually know Zhang Xiaotian at all. It was as if a cold glass barrier between them made it feel like the man she lived with wasn't real, but a reflection in a mirror. The scene she had been eagerly awaiting never materialized. By the time summer vacation began, Zhang Xiaotian had not returned home. The school organized a work and learn program for high school students, and Gu Ying was excited to participate. As the head teacher of the second-year class, Zhang Xiaotian led the students into the mountains. The day before they went, Zhang Xiaotian came home and took away a rattan wooden box. Coincidentally, Zhang Tianyi, Zhang Xiaotian's son, caught a cold with a fever on that very day. Gu Ying took him to the hospital. When she returned, she found a note from Zhang Xiaotian that was only 3 words long. "I'm leaving." Seeing these 3 random words, Gu Ying's heart skipped a beat, and she had an ominous premonition. And wouldn't you know it? Not long after, Zhang Xiaotian was nowhere to be found. 5. Disappearance and Madness. The news of Zhang Xiaotian's disappearance was initially whispered to Gu Ying by a colleague who worked with him to bring students into the mountains. At first, Gu Ying didn't pay much attention to it. How could a living person just disappear like that? She thought that Zhang Xiaotian's disappearance was only temporary, and that perhaps her husband had just gone back to the provincial capital to visit his family without taking leave. He had always been my way, free and easy. Similar behavior had happened before. Just married soon after a weekend, Zhang Xiaotian, alone by coach, quietly back to the provincial capital, not even greeted Gu Ying to say a word. Gu Ying was worried sick and couldn't sleep or eat. She looked everywhere in Pai Town, but there was no sign of Zhang Xiaotian. But on the 3rd day, Zhang Xiaotian showed up out of the blue in front of his house. Gu Ying looked a bit upset, and Zhang Xiaotian said, "A classmate working in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs came back from the Soviet Union, brought me a record, let me go get it," as if he had been away from home for 2 whole days, but had been strolling around Pai Town to come back. Would Zhang Xiaotian behave the same way this time? However, until the teachers and students who had gone to the mountains to participate in the labor returned to school, there was still no news of Zhang Xiaotian. At this time, the news of Zhang Xiaotian's disappearance had already spread throughout Pai Town Middle School and the entire town of Pai Town, and it had reached Gu Ying's ears through various channels. It was said that Zhang Xiaotian had disappeared after he was caught seducing a female student in his class and felt ashamed to face people. Some people said that Zhang Xiaotian had seduced more than one girl in the class he was the class teacher of, and that someone had already reported him to the school leaders and the Education Bureau of Chuzhou Special Area. This time, the truth finally came out, and he was caught in the act. It was said that the person who caught him in the act was Sun Nina, who worked in the same teaching and research office as Zhang Xiaotian. The two had been in a relationship for quite some time, and according to Sun Nina, Zhang Xiaotian had promised to divorce his wife and marry her. Sun Nina couldn't tolerate it after discovering Zhang Xiaotian's secret of seducing girls and secretly followed him to Pigu Mountain Farm to catch him in the act. Some folks also said that Zhang Xiaotian was quite the ladies' man, with a talent for making love that was second to none, even better than Yimen Qing's. It was said that no woman who had been with him could ever leave. It was noted that almost everyone at Pai Town Middle School knew about these rumors about Zhang Xiaotian, except for his wife, Gu Ying, who was kept in the dark. The legend had a story behind it, and Gu Ying couldn't help but believe it. She felt her heart was like a piece of glass, breaking into pieces. She heard the sound of glass breaking, and the broken glass cut her heart, and blood was dripping out. but she kept going, refusing to let herself shed tears. Every day she sent her son Zhong Tianyi off to kindergarten and school like any other mother. When people gave her strange looks, she just smiled and let them know she was doing okay. However, one day, Vice Principal Gong and the Dean of Studies from Pai Town Middle School came to the purple tile house and told Gu Ying that Zhong Xiaotian was gone. They told her that Zhong Xiaotian had accidentally gone missing while leading students on a work project on the mountain. They didn't mention why he had gone missing, and that's okay, because they probably didn't want to upset Gu Ying by telling her something she might not be able to handle. They said that the school and the town government had organized a search party to look for Zhong Xiaotian all over Pigu Mountain, but they couldn't find him. Teacher Gu Ying, the disappearance of Comrade Zhong Xiaotian is a great loss to Pai Town Middle School. We were deeply saddened and upset. Vice Principal Gong, looking solemn in his blue khaki Zhongshan suit with fastened buttons, said in a subdued tone, "On behalf of the school, I express my deepest condolences. We have also reported to Vice Governor Comrade Zhong Xiaotian's stepfather. Comrade Zhong Xiaotian was an excellent teacher, not only outstanding in his profession, but also politically strong. The school's revolutionary committee had originally decided to promote Comrade Zhong Xiaotian to be the vice principal and deputy director of the revolutionary committee." Vice Principal Gong looked a bit disappointed. He looked at Gu Ying as if he was feeling guilty and left with the silent dean of studies before Gu Ying could say anything. As they left behind a yellowing rattan wooden box, the same one that Zhong Xiaotian had taken away when he left home. When it was at home, the box was always locked, and no one knew what was inside. When Gu Ying was left alone in the room, she couldn't help but feel curious and opened the box. Inside, she found a copy of Jin Ping Mei, a book she had read before, and a new English record. Gu Ying's English wasn't very good, but she could still tell that it was a record by the British rock band, the Rolling Stones, titled Flower, released in 1966. A stack of envelopes was also addressed to Zhong Xiaotian and marked for the Art Teaching and Research Office at Dongjiang University. The return address on the envelopes was a mystery, with just a scrawled English signature, Anna Louie. About half a year later, one morning, Gu Ying was giving a music class to Class 1, Senior 1, teaching the students to sing The Rising Sun on the Prairie. Vice Principal Gong had the teaching secretary ask her to go to the office after class. After class, Gu Ying headed towards Vice Principal Gong's office. As soon as she arrived at the office door, Vice Principal Gong greeted her and said in a hushed tone, "Teacher Gu, Vice Governor Song wants to see you." "Deputy Governor Song?" She didn't react immediately. "It's Zhong Xiaotian's stepfather," Vice Principal Gong reminded her. Gu Ying's face showed a subtle "oh," and her eyes conveyed a thoughtful yet distant expression. Ever since Zhong Xiaotian disappeared, she had always been so wooden when interacting with others, almost a different person compared to the past. Seeing how Gu Ying's face fell, Vice Principal Gong looked kindly at her swollen belly and asked, "Is your body okay, Teacher Gu?" Gu Ying nodded, her face red with embarrassment. Vice Principal Gong said nothing further. He gently adjusted the buttons on his Zhongshan suit and said, "Let's go then. Vice Governor Song is in the school reception room." After taking a few steps, he stopped again, seemingly a little worried, and said, "Teacher Gu, Vice Governor Song just liberated and came to attend the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Chupi Highway. He even took time out of his busy schedule to meet with you. You should try to make as few requests as possible and avoid putting the leaders in a difficult position." But Gu Yingjiang didn't hear him and muttered to herself, "How can a big, living person just disappear like that?" The school reception room was where school leaders usually received and met with superior leaders. It was Gu Ying's first time there. She saw a silver-gray car parked at the entrance, covered in dust, as if it had traveled a long way. A young man in a gray Zhongshan suit stood at the entrance, his hair perfectly combed. When he saw them approaching, he quickly came forward. Vice Principal Gong shook the other person's hand with a warm smile, saying, "Secretary Huang, I've brought Teacher Gu here." Secretary Huang nodded in greeting, but his attention was on Gu Ying. "Hello, Teacher Gu," he said warmly. "I'm the secretary of Vice Governor Song. You can call me Xiao Huang." But Gu Yingxiang didn't hear him and muttered to herself, "How can a big, living person just disappear?" Secretary Huang was taken aback and at a loss for words. Vice Principal Gong leaned in and whispered in his ear, "Teacher Gu seems a bit mentally unstable." With a dry cough, he raised his voice and said, "Secretary Huang, could you kindly take Teacher Gu to see Vice Governor Song? I won't be going in." When Secretary Huang led Gu Ying into the reception room, she saw a dignified elder sitting on the sofa in the center. His chin was slightly pointed, his eyebrows were thick, his back was straight, and his hair, though graying, was still thick and neatly combed back. He wore a navy blue Zhongshan suit with the collar open, revealing a white shirt underneath. When he saw Gu Ying enter, he gave a slight nod of his head and lifted his hand towards the sofa beside him. Gu Ying paused for a moment, as if thinking something through, before gracefully settling onto the sofa. Secretary Huang quickly brought over a cup of tea, gently closed the door and left, leaving the room in a peaceful silence. The reception room was now just two people, and the silence was palpable. Gu Ying felt that Vice Governor Song had been subtly assessing her. After a while, Vice Governor Song tapped his hands on the sofa's armrests repeatedly, like sending a telegram, and cleared his throat lightly, saying, "The comrades from Pai Town Middle School have reported to me about Zhang Xiaotian's situation. I'm really disappointed and upset about how he's been acting and why he's gone. I never expected him to be so morally corrupt." When Vice Governor Song said this, he looked a little upset. He tapped his fingers hard on the sofa's armrests twice, stood up, folded his arms behind his back, paced back and forth in the middle of the reception room, and then turned around. Clearly, he had made some kind of decision, and he asked in a curious tone, "Xiaogu, did Zhang Xiaotian tell you why he doesn't use the surname Song but the surname Zong?" Gu Ying wasn't quite sure how to respond, but Vice Governor Song didn't seem to need her to answer anything, and continued, "You know, I was once Zhang Xiaotian's stepfather, and his biological father's name was—" Vice Governor Song said a name that sounded a little strange, and his face showed a mystery that was hard to read. "Oh, I forgot to tell you, Zhang Xiaotian's mother is called Anna. She's an Englishwoman, and we got divorced many years ago." Gu Ying sat quietly on the sofa, like a statue. Vice Governor Song looked a bit surprised when he saw her expression. He picked up a cup of tea from the coffee table, took a sip, glanced at Gu Ying's swollen belly, and said, "As Zhang Xiaotian's former stepfather, I feel sorry for his actions. If there's anything you need, whether it's work or personal, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. After all, Zhang Xiaotian and I were once father and son in name." He gave a little shrug and added, "I came to attend the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Chupi Highway. Local leaders filled me in on Zhang Xiaotian's situation, and I really feel for him. I also sympathize deeply with your unfortunate experience, so I came to meet you. If you're facing any challenges, please don't hesitate to reach out to me." At this point, Vice Governor Song took out a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped the corners of his eyes. However, Gu Ying didn't say a word. From the moment she walked into the reception room until now, she hadn't uttered a single word. After a moment of silence, Vice Governor Song stood up from the sofa. The slightly ajar door opened at that moment, and Secretary Huang quietly walked in. Gu Ying understood that this was a gesture of respect, a quiet way of saying goodbye. But she didn't say a word. With one hand on the sofa armrest and the other holding her growing belly, she stood up slowly, taking care not to jostle her unborn child. Gu Ying turned around as she walked to the door and smiled strangely at Vice Governor Song's back, murmuring, "How can a big, living person just disappear?" At that moment, Vice Principal Gong trotted towards the reception room entrance from afar, stirring up a cloud of dust under his feet. He ran very fast, like a student who was afraid of being punished by the teacher for being late. As he ran, he shouted shrilly, "Vice Governor Song, please have your meal before returning to the provincial capital. The cafeteria has prepared your meal." It sounded less like a polite request to stay and more like a heartfelt plea. But Vice Governor Song didn't seem to hear, ducking his head and climbing into the car door that Secretary Huang had opened. With a puff of black smoke billowing from behind him, the car shot forward, leaving Vice Principal Gong standing there panting and looking a bit awkward. Gu Ying looked at Vice Principal Gong and giggled. Chapter 3. 1. Water Lily, Tadpole, and Guzheng. Guzheng often walked with her mother on the street when she was young. Her mother, who had been cooped up at home for a long time, always enjoyed venturing out onto the street. Whenever her brother Zhang Tianyi saw this, he would quickly instruct her, "Little sister, hurry up and follow your mother. Don't let her run around on the street." Little Sister was Guzheng's nickname. Guzheng put down her homework and hurriedly followed her mother, holding her hand as they walked towards the street. As soon as her mother set foot on the street, she became animated and looked around, curious about everything she saw. In spring, the Toon trees on both sides of the street would be covered with tender Toon buds. Like a child, her mother excitedly shouted, "Little sister, let's pick some Toon buds to eat. They're so fragrant." At this time, some people would gather around, point at her mother and whisper, "She's crazy. She was so beautiful back then." Guzheng, however, didn't quite understand why people thought her mother was crazy. Even when her brother and mother argued, he would suddenly blurt out, "You're a lunatic." At that moment, her mother, who had been crying, would suddenly stop, wiping the tears from her face with the back of her hand, much like a child being scolded by an adult. She would quietly return to her bedroom or walk to the door of the purple-tiled house, staring blankly at the pond. Her brother didn't like it when his mum cried. Whenever he heard her crying, he would block his ears with 2 fingers, stamp his feet, and shout, "Mom, please don't cry, my brain is about to explode." After saying that, he would angrily run out and not come back home for a long time. At that time, her brother had just started junior high school, but he spoke like an adult and always gave orders to her and her mother. He was like the grown-up in the family, while her mother, like Guzheng, was more like a child. Everything in the house was subject to his orders. He even collected her mother's salary at the middle school finance office. The brother usually took very good care of Guzheng. Every time he received a paycheck for his mother, he would buy her a few lollipops on the street. At the same time, he didn't forget to buy a bouquet of flowers for his mother. Whenever she saw the flowers, her mother was so happy that she danced like a child, holding them and sniffing them. In Guzheng's impression, Mum especially loved beauty. Mum was a beautiful woman. At that time, Guzheng had already started primary school and began to understand things. But she didn't know why she only had a mother and no father. She asked her mother, who looked at her dazedly and muttered to herself, "How could a perfectly healthy person just disappear?" After saying this, she giggled. When Mum was alone, she often repeated this phrase. Guzheng repeatedly asked her brother about it, but he always responded impatiently. With his hands on his hips like an adult, he would ask in a series of rhetorical questions, "Do you believe what Mum is saying? Mum's out of her mind, isn't she?" Then, why do others have dads but we don't? Where has Dad gone? How many times have you asked this? Our father died a long time ago. Her brother sounded angry. Guzheng sounded unsure. "Mum's not crazy and Dad's not dead. He's still alive," she exclaimed. Her brother was pissed off at her and rolled his eyes. "You're so annoying. I'm going out to play. I'm ignoring you." Whenever he had free time, my brother would sneak out to play on the street, leaving Guzheng and their mother at home. Their mother was always easygoing about where her brother went, but she did make sure to ask Guzheng when it was time to eat. "Where's Zhang Tianyi?" My mother often sat alone in her room, lost in thought as she gazed at the rattan wooden box. The box was locked, and no one had ever seen it opened. No one knew what was inside. Guzheng once asked her brother about it, and he said he didn't know either. Sometimes my mother would stare blankly at herself in the rectangular mirror on the bed, lost in thought for a long time. One day, Guzheng noticed a white hair in her mother's hair and plucked it out, handing it to her and saying, "Mom, you have a white hair on your head." Mother stared at the white hair, reached out and grabbed it, holding it closely in front of her face. Suddenly, she covered her face with both hands and began to cry. Guzheng was at a loss, but after a while, her mother forgot about it, took her hand and said, "Little sister, let's go and feed the tadpoles with Mum." Her mother always called her by my nickname and rarely by her given name. In fact, her mother gave her the name Guzheng. When she was in the first grade of elementary school, she didn't have a given name yet. When it was time to fill out the registration form, the teacher wrote Zong Xiaomei for her, according to her household registration book. She didn't like that name, though, and so she didn't respond when the teacher would call her by it. The teacher was patient and suggested, "Zong Xiaomei, why don't you go home and ask your parents for a formal name? Otherwise, you can't come to class." On the way home, she told her brother what the teacher said, saying, "Brother, you were listed as the parent on the registration form. Please give me a given name." Her brother was stumped, but after a moment of thought, he suggested, "Let's go home and ask Mum to help out." Guzheng said, "Didn't you say that Mum is crazy? How can she name a child that way?" The brother choked. "Maybe Mum is not completely crazy. Besides, Mum used to be a teacher. How can a teacher not know how to give names?" Guzheng felt that her brother was a minor quibbler, but she had to agree. When the siblings returned home, their mother was lovingly wiping the Guzheng with a clean cloth. She wiped it twice a day, and the dark body of the Guzheng shone brightly in the dim light, casting shadows on those around her. The siblings gathered around, eager to lend a hand. After wiping it, the older brother teasingly said to their mother, "Give your little sister a proper name." Her brother spoke in a commanding tone, and their mother always obeyed him as if he were not her child but she was his. After a brief pause, she said gently, "Guzheng." At that moment, Mother's gaze was fixed on the Guzheng, and the siblings thought she was referring to the instrument. "I asked you to give little sister a proper name, not to mention this broken instrument." Her brother was impatient once again. "Guzheng!" Those two words spat out of Mum's mouth again. This time she turned her gaze to Guzheng. Guzheng suddenly understood. "Brother, Mum is naming me. Guzheng!" She clapped her hands in delight. "Did you hear that? My school's name is Guzheng, and I have the same last name as my mum, Gu." When her mum heard Guzheng's words, a wisp of a smile appeared on her face, and she wrapped her arms around her and took her into her arms. Guzheng felt so warm and loved in her mother's embrace. Mum's favorite thing was feeding tadpoles. Every spring, the pond in front of the purple-tiled house ripples with clear waves like a translucent jade. The lotus leaves in the pond stand tall and graceful, covered with green water lilies. The little tadpoles were happily waving their tails in the water, swimming in groups. On quiet nights, Guzheng heard a series of chirping noises coming from the pond. Mum said the little tadpoles were hungry and were happily munching on the lotus and water lily leaves. Every day, Mum lovingly saved the leftovers and steamed buns to feed the tadpoles in the pond. They usually ate at the elementary school cafeteria and brought food back to eat. On weekends, when the cafeteria was closed, they cooked for themselves. Every time Guzheng went to the cafeteria to get food, Mum would quietly remind her, "Little sister, get a little more food for the tadpoles." She was afraid that her brother would hear her. His brother objected to his mother feeding the tadpoles, saying she was wasting food. However, Guzheng stood firmly by her mother's side on this matter. She loved tadpoles too. Every time she fed the tadpoles, her mother was very devoted to them, squatting by the pond, crumpling up the leftover rice or steamed buns crumbs in the bowl, and slowly scattering them into the pond while chanting, "Don't grab it, you'll have some to eat, and when you're full, you'll be able to grow your body." Her face was full of love and affection, as if she were a mother breastfeeding her child. The child was feeding the mother. After spring, the tadpoles grew into frogs, filling the pond with their joyous croaking. When Guzheng came back from school, she often saw her mother standing under the begonia tree in front of the door, absent-mindedly muttering to herself, "Where have the tadpoles gone?" The begonia tree stood about 10 feet tall, with a straight and sturdy trunk that was as black as if it had been coated with a thick layer of paint. Its branches and leaves were lush and dense, swaying vigorously and reaching down to the eaves like arms. Every spring, the tree was covered with pink begonia flowers, blossoming one after another in clusters, reflecting in the mirror-like pond like patches of beautiful rosy clouds. And in the fall, the fruits ripened, ready to be enjoyed. Her brother would gently tap the branches with a bamboo pole, and the fruits would fall like a shower of rain. Guzheng and her mother picked up the crab apples, washed them in the pond, put them in their mouths, and bit them with their teeth. They were sour and sweet, and their mouths were full of saliva. Mum was as happy as a child, overjoyed, and the crow's feet that gradually increased at the corners of her eyes seemed to be less, and she looked several years younger than before. When Mum was happy, she took out the Guzheng from the house, sat under the crabapple tree, and played it seriously. The piece of music Mum liked to play the most was a beautiful foreign song. Guzheng later learned that the piece was titled Red Berries in Bloom. When Mum was playing with great enthusiasm, she couldn't help but hum a few lines in a low voice. Red berries bloom by the river in the field. There's a young man who really pleases me, but I can't confess my love to him. I have so much confidence in my heart, but I can't express it. Mum sang really beautifully. At that moment, Guzheng felt that her mother was the most beautiful and elegant woman in the world. How could such a wonderful mother be considered crazy? Whenever Guzheng thought of this, she felt depressed. It made her feel especially sad when someone said in front of her, "Your mum is crazy." 2. Hands up. Zhang Tianyi, like his sister Guzheng, hated it most when someone said his mother was crazy. Zhang Tianyi said the same thing when he was angry, but he didn't mean it that way. But these were two different things. When he said his mother was crazy, what he really wanted to say was, "My mother is not crazy." He wished his mother would still take care of him carefully and gently as she used to, instead of being like this now, laughing and crying, lucid and confused at times, and having to take care of her himself. And all because Dad was gone, Dad was missing, Dad was dead. He didn't know which was true, but the only thing that was true was that Dad had disappeared from the house, from his life. Zhang Tianyi had always been hesitant to face this harsh reality. Still, the townspeople never ceased reminding him, even pointing their fingers and saying, "Zhang Tianyi, your father is a big hooligan." When he heard this, he felt his blood boil and wanted to rush up and say something to them. But it wasn't just one person who said this. Many people in the town said the same thing. Some were too scared to say it to his face, so they whispered it behind his back. He felt so angry, but he couldn't do anything about it. At that moment, Zhang Tianyi felt ashamed and humiliated for not being able to protect himself, his mother, and his sister. Zhang Tianyi felt a deep sense of responsibility, as if he were a man with a duty to protect those he loved. For a while, he felt so hurt by the people in Pai Town who had humiliated him both in public and behind his back. But he kept his feelings to himself. But little by little, he started to feel this hate towards that person, his father, who had been gone from home for a long time. In his heart, he always referred to his father as that person. He felt that all the humiliation and pain he was going through now came from that person. He wondered why his father had left without a trace. Was he dead or alive? Why did the townspeople call him a big hooligan? What had he done to deserve such a reputation? Zhang Tianyi was overwhelmed with questions, like a swarm of locusts buzzing around in his mind, leaving him with a throbbing headache. At such times, he would vent his frustration on his mother and sister at home, only to feel remorse afterwards. This would lead him to leave home and wander the streets aimlessly. Pai Town was a small place with only 2 streets, one running horizontally and the other vertically, which he could readily explore in the time it takes to smoke a cigarette. It was in those moments of contemplation that Zhang Tianyi first discovered smoking. At first, he only smoked to escape his troubles, picking up cigarette butts that others had discarded on the ground. As he smoked more, he found it increasingly difficult to quit. Zhang Tianyi started buying cigarettes, but he didn't use the money from his mother's salary to buy cigarettes. That money was earmarked for the family's needs, and it was sacred. Since his mother fell ill, the school only paid her half of her salary every month. After his sister started school, his mother's meager salary became increasingly insufficient to cover the family's expenses. Zhang Tianyi was a kind and hard-working student, and he used his spare time to collect scrap metal and sell it at the town's scrapyard to help his family make a little extra money. The money he spent on smoking came from the money he earned from selling scrap metal. One day he was searching for scrap metal at home to sell to the scrapyard. He had an idea for the rattan box that his father had left behind. The rattan wooden box was secured with a large brass lock. Since his father went missing, the box had remained locked and never been opened. The brass lock, golden and heavy, could fetch a substantial amount of money if he sold it at the recycling station. Zhang Tianyi jiggled the lock with a wire and managed to open it. At first, he thought the box might have some rare or exotic treasures. Curiously, he lifted the lid and discovered inside a record with foreign text, a stack of envelopes, and a book wrapped in craft paper, thicker than a brick. At home, there was also a large leather suitcase that his mother had brought from the city when she went to the countryside to work. It was filled with books such as The Red and the Black, Madame Bovary, Wuthering Heights, Jane Eyre, Anna Karenina, Resurrection, and more. As a child, Zhang Tianyi often saw his mother reading these books enthusiastically. After entering elementary school, he had curiously flipped through a few of them, but the foreign place names and names of people in the books were difficult for him to remember. After reading a few pages, he felt dizzy and sleepy. But there was something special about this book. It was filled with vibrant illustrations depicting people without clothes. Zhang Tianyi felt his cheeks flush, and his blood felt as if it were on fire, causing a sudden surge of heat. Like a thief, he looked around the room, ensuring no one else was around. Then, as if possessed by a demon, he secretly pocketed the book, locked the rattan wooden box with the large brass lock, and quietly put it back in its original place. Later, Zhang Tianyi learned that the book was called Jinping Mei and was banned. From that day on, Zhang Tianyi spent every evening hiding in his room, immersing himself in the illustrated edition of Jinping Mei. He did not know when he began to pay attention to his appearance. Apart from indulging in smoking, he even purchased 2 t-shirts or jackets, which were commonly worn by many young people in Pai Town, along with leather shoes. Now and then, he'd spend a dime to catch a movie. During that time, the Pigu People's Commune had just transformed into Pai Town, and the Grand Hall, which had been used for mass rallies and various cultural performances, was converted into a cinema. The Peking opera model plays and war feature films that Pai Town people used to watch gradually decreased, and some Hong Kong, Taiwan, and foreign films began to be shown, such as Walter Defends Sarajevo, The Bus Adventure, The Chase, and Hometown. Zhang Tianyi had a series of dreams the night after watching Looking Home and The Hunt. He dreamed of the young Akipo, the beautiful Japanese actress Kurihara Komi, and Shimen Ching from the illustrations in Jinping Mei, who leaped down from the pages. That night, Zhang Tian had a solo sexual act. Zhang Tianyi's personal expenses were increasing day by day, and his financial situation was becoming increasingly strained. One afternoon, as soon as school was out, Zhang Tianyi couldn't wait to leave the classroom and head to the brick and tile factory in Pai Town. The brick and tile factory was located on the riverside at the western end of the town, occupying a large area. From the outside, rows of red factory buildings stood in the center of the factory area, looking very impressive. The brick and tile factory workers all wore safety helmets and blue denim work clothes during working hours, giving them a very imposing appearance. Some young workers, off-duty, go to the town of Pai to go shopping, but also, as usual, wearing their work clothes and helmets, attract a lot of girls' and boys' envious eyes. But wait, there's more. In the heart of the factory area, there's a chimney that's a real showstopper. They said it was several hundred meters high, thick at the base and thin at the top, tapering as it ascended, like an unpeeled bamboo shoot. Some folks even said it looked like a mail organ, visible from dozens of miles away. The brick and tile factory, a symbol of the community's pride, had been a fixture of Pai Town since its completion. The brick and tile factory, established during the Cultural Revolution, was the largest community-run enterprise in Pai Town. It had a factory-run hospital and a school for the children. After being renamed a township enterprise, although the brick and tile factory remained as prosperous as before, it no longer held the same prestige as before. In the past, no one dared enter the factory area to take even a single brick or piece of wire. However, people now often sneak into the factory to steal scrap metal. Some of that iron is parts that were removed from the brick-making machine and thrown on the ground, waiting for repair. Then those parts were sold at the town's waste recycling station. People have tasted the sweetness, and more people were going to the brick and tile factory to pick up trash. Now, Zhang Tianyi also came to the brick and tile factory to take his chances. Brick Factory was the implementation of the 3-shift work system. 24 hours a day were working. Almost to the end of the day, the factory was still a busy scene. The workers used the chicken car, moving the brick from the open brick-making site to the burning of bricks and tiles of the big kiln, that a vast chimney was erected from here. The factory had no walls, and it was possible to enter from any point. Zhang Tianyi hid for a while in a castor field on the side of the highway near the factory. He lit a cigarette and smoked it while patiently waiting for darkness. There were many cigarette butts scattered in the castor field, and it was obvious that many people had hidden here. After about 2 cigarettes of work, the sky was dark. Zhang Tianyi strolled out of the castor bean field and made his way to the factory area, taking his time. At that time, it was the shift change time for the workers. The road leading to the big cave from the brick-making site was brightly lit, and people were coming and going, but no one noticed Zhang Tianyi. He took this opportunity to sneak into the brick-making site. On the site, the finished bricks were piled up in neat rows, stacked like an army ready for battle. It was Zhang Tianyi's first time here. He saw that it was just as the people had described. All kinds of abandoned or repaired parts were scattered everywhere, covered with engine oil and diesel and exuding an unpleasant smell. He was so excited that his eyes sparkled as if he had found a treasure. He untied a long snakeskin bag from his waist, shook it open, then crouched down and quickly put the black objects on the ground into the bag. The bag was almost full in no time, and he couldn't carry it anymore. Zhang Tianyi finally picked up the heavy bag and walked outside. But just as he took 2 steps, a sudden shout rang in his ear. "Stop! Don't move! Raise your hands!" Zhang Tianyi was startled and turned his face to see 2 teenagers wearing red scarves jumping out from behind the brick billets. One held a small pistol made of bullet shells, and the other had a bright red tasseled gun. Zhang Tianyi couldn't help but drop the bag and raise his hands. 3. Leniency for confession. 2 young men, looking majestic and imposing, escorted Zhang Tianyi through the factory's main road lined with brick blocks, heading towards the factory headquarters. The road was piled with broken bricks and tiles on both sides, which, under the pale electric lights, looked patchy and like a ruin. Every so often, on their way to or from shift change, some other workers would look at them with a friendly, curious expression. One of them asked, "Wang Cheng, who is this person you've caught?" "He stole something from the factory, and I caught him," the young man named Wang Cheng replied with his head held high, exuding a sense of pride akin to the little 8th Route Army soldiers who captured prisoners in the movies. He pointed his cartridge case pistol at Zhang Tianyi's waist to show his authority and said, "Hurry up, and don't try any tricks on me. Don't even think about escaping." Zhang Tianyi defended, "I didn't try to escape." "Be honest, no sophistry." Zhang Tianyi's back waist was pushed by the shell pistol again, this time with more force. He felt a burst of pain and grunted. At that moment, another teenager said, "Wang Sheng, you were mistreating prisoners. I'm going to report you to your father." Badong, If you tell on me, I won't let you copy from me in the next exam, and I won't let you participate in any tasks in the factory," Wang Cheng warned. Upon hearing this, the young man named Badong immediately cowered, but was still unwillingly retorted, "You're just good at threatening people. You're even more domineering than your father." Wang Cheng asked, a bit warily, "Who said that? Was it your father?" Badong paused, thinking back, then said, "It wasn't my dad. It was I who said it." Wang Cheng looked at Badong, his face showing he didn't believe him, and said, "I know your dad often speaks ill of my dad in the factory." "Humph, you're slandering. My dad has never said anything bad about your dad," Badong protested loudly. When Wang Cheng saw Badong's anxious, red-eyed look, he smiled cheekily. "My father said, we should be united and not divided. We should be honorable and not engage in plots and tricks. I'm not going to argue with you." "This is a quotation from Chairman Mao. Dare you say it's what your father said?" Wang Cheng's face was slightly dark, with a big forehead and two black and bright eyes that always seemed to be pondering something. As for Badong, he had fair skin and was very handsome. His eyes dart around, revealing a shrewd and cunning demeanor. The two teenagers chatted as they walked, taking turns guiding Zhang Tianyi to the factory office. The office was not large, with a large desk in the middle and several rattan chairs and benches arranged around it. At the center of the front wall, there were two portraits of leaders, one of Chairman Mao and the other of Chairman Hua. Above the portraits was a bold slogan, "Inherit Chairman Mao's legacy, grasp the guiding principles and govern the country, work hard and fast, and strive to build the 4 modernizations." Zhang Tianyi was ushered into the office, where Wang Cheng said to him in a friendly but firm tone, "Please start by writing your confession, and I know you'll be honest. My dad always said, 'Confess and be lenient, resist and be strict.'" With a warm smile, he offered Zhang Tianyi a piece of paper and a ballpoint pen. Then he looked at Ba Dong and said, "Please stand guard at the door and don't let him escape. I'll go get my dad." "Yes, comrade squadron leader," Ba Dong replied, standing at the door with his red spear in hand, his head held high and chest puffed out. He even imitated the little soldiers from the movies and gave Wang Cheng a salute. Wang Cheng smiled warmly, extended his small fist, and tapped Ba Dong's chest gently. Then, with a swift and playful bounce, he rushed out of the factory office. Zhang Tianyi stared at the blank sheet of paper, not knowing what to write. He had always been a star student, excelling in language class and always being the first to hand in his papers. But now, he felt like his mind was a complete blank, unable to write a single word. He was worried about what kind of punishment he would receive. They said that if he got caught by the brick and tile factory, the lightest punishment would be labor. If the circumstances were severe, he would be handed over to the police station and possibly even paraded through the streets. In the past, someone who stole from the collective and got caught would always be paraded through the streets of Pai Town and denounced. He imagined himself tied up in 5-point restraints, wearing a paper hat on his head and being led through the streets by a crowd. People would point at his spine and scold him, "Zhang Tianyi, you were a thief. Your father is a big hooligan, and you were a little hooligan." He looked up and saw the portraits of Chairman Mao and Chairman Hua on the wall, which looked very kind under the incandescent light. He quietly said, "Chairman Mao and Chairman Hua, I was wrong. I should not steal collective property. Please forgive me, and don't let this happen again. I'll be embarrassed if I have to walk through the streets of Pai Town with you watching." He repeated, "Long live Chairman Mao," in his heart, his voice soft and sincere. He forgot that Chairman Mao had already passed away. Then he looked at Badong, who was standing at the door. His eyes rolled around a few times, and suddenly he had an inspiration. He suddenly put down his ballpoint pen and clutched his stomach, yelling out in pain. Badong shot him a look and asked, "What's wrong?" "My stomach hurts. I need to go poop." Zhang Tianyi looked a bit flustered and said, "Let's get this over with, or I might have an accident." "In the movies, when the 8th Route Army catches the traitor, they always use this trick to escape." Badong chuckled as he looked at him. "You want to deceive me? Not a chance. When Zhang Tianyi saw that his plan was quickly uncovered, he felt somewhat unwilling to accept it and came up with another plan. That kid just now isn't taller than you. What's his name? Wang Cheng. Why does he always bully you? Were you afraid of him? Huh? Who's afraid of him? Were you saying I'm afraid of him? Badong looked a bit taken aback, but then he pointed his red-feathered spear at Zhang Tianyi. I'm not sure I understand what you mean. Could you please clarify? The tip of the red-plumed spear was made of wood and coated with white paint, making it obvious that it's fake. Zhang Tianyi felt more confident. If you're really not afraid, then let me go. Upon hearing this, Badong put down his red-plumed spear and deflated like a balloon. I wouldn't dream of it. If his father finds out, it will be terrible. Who is his father that you're so afraid of? His father is the factory director. Everyone in the factory is under his authority, and even my father, the deputy director, is under his authority. Zhang Tianyi understood that his teasing had backfired. Feeling a bit embarrassed, he sighed and picked up his pen, looking at the empty room in front of him. Just as Zhang Tianyi contemplated writing his confession, heavy footsteps sounded from outside. The footsteps came closer and then suddenly stopped. Zhang Tianyi looked up and saw a man with a full beard, a bronze-colored face, and leopard-like eyes appear at the door. He wore an old military uniform that had seen better days, with his collar open and trousers rolled up to his knees. His shoes were covered in mud and ash. His left hand was stained with oil, and he was holding a wrench also covered in oil. The right hand, empty sleeves. The sleeve was empty, so it was a handful. Close behind him was a young man called Wang Sheng, who looked like a small bodyguard. Report to Uncle Factory Director. Badong gave the handful a somewhat unconventional military salute. You've done a great deed today, boy. Tomorrow I'll talk to your principal and ask him to give you and Wang Cheng a big award certificate. The handful gave Badong a friendly pat on the head and said with a laugh, Your job is done. Hurry back, and don't forget to ask your mother to make some dumplings to reward you. Just say it was my idea. Badong had already run away when he received the order. The A handful strode into the office, his eyes shining with warmth as he looked at Zhang Tianyi, who was hanging his head. With a firm voice, he asked, Are you the young man who took things from the factory? What's your name? Say it. Zhang Tianyi kept his head down and remained silent. Wang Cheng, who was standing nearby, spoke up in a supportive tone. Dad, this guy is so stubborn. He wrote only a few words when asked to write a confession. He gently handed the piece of paper Zhang Tianyi wrote to the A handful. The A handful took it, glanced at it, and his gaze suddenly stopped on the paper. After a moment, he looked away and turned to Zhang Tianyi, studying him carefully from head to toe. Your name is Zhang Tianyi? Mm-hmm. Your father's name is Zhang Xiaotian? Mm-hmm. Your mother's name is Gu Ying? There. Are they all middle school teachers? Zhang Tianyi looked a little confused and noticed a strange look in the A handful's eyes. He put the greasy wrench on the table and sat down. After a silence, he told Zhang Tianyi, Kid, I know your parents. Two talented young people. When they first moved from the provincial capital to Pai Town, I even went to Chuzhou to welcome them. At that time, I was Minister of the People's Armed Forces of the Commune and Deputy Director of the Revolutionary Committee. As he spoke, he fumbled in his coat pocket and pulled out a pack of crumpled Dacian men's cigarettes. He took one between his lips and fumbled in a drawer for a box of matches. He lit the match with clumsy but skillful movements and took a deep drag. After your father disappeared, I led the cadre militia into the mountains to search. We scoured the area for over a month but couldn't find him. Even now, there's no official word on whether he's dead or alive. Your father made his share of mistakes, and his disappearance is a bit of a mystery. But hey, we all make mistakes, right? They were bright young people who followed Chairman Mao's call and settled in our Pai Town. Is your mother still sick? Zong Tian was taken aback by the surprising change in the handful. He looked different from the dignified figure he had just seen, and his tone and expression were now more friendly. He hummed in recognition, and tears welled in his eyes for some reason. "Kid, if I remember correctly, you have a younger sister, right? It must be tough for you, being an orphan and a single mother," the handful said with a frown. "How about this? Hey, why don't you try something new? From now on, you can work at the factory on Sundays and holidays. That way, you can earn some money to support your family. But," he added, "you'll still be detained if you do anything to damage the property." Chairman Mao once said, "Learn from past mistakes to avoid future ones and treat the disease to save the patient." He tossed the cigarette butt to the ground. "Hey, kid, what's your name?" "Oh, Zong Tianyi. You look like your father, but you're not as tall. You're still young." Then he remembered something and asked, "Would you like something to eat? I'll ask the cook in the mess hall to make you some noodles." Without waiting for Zong Tianyi's reply, he kindly instructed Wang Cheng, who was standing beside him, "Son, go ask the night chef in the mess hall to make him a bowl of noodles. Put it on my bill." Wang Cheng pursed his lips and uttered an, Then with a look of reluctance, he stuck the pistol with the cartridge case in his waist and walked out. Zong Tianyi felt that Wang Cheng's eyes were different from those of ordinary people, but he couldn't quite put his finger on what exactly made them different. After pondering for a while, he finally realized Wang Cheng had a single eyelid on his right eye and a double eyelid on his left eye. 4. The head of the family. After being locked up for 2 days, Zong Tianyi emerged from the brick factory. It was already afternoon when he returned home. As soon as he approached the purple-tiled house, his sister Guzheng flew to him like a bird and threw herself into his arms. "Brother, where have you been for the past 2 days? Mom and I were so worried." Seeing her teary eyes, Zong Tian felt a pang of guilt. He felt like a deer caught in the headlights, not knowing how to tell his sister about the past 2 days. Just as he was about to say something, his sister whispered in his ear, "Brother, there's a stranger in our house. Mom and I were so scared." "A stranger? Where is he?" Zong Tianyi asked quickly. "He's sitting at home. He came early this morning. He said he was our grandfather, but Mom said she didn't know him and was hiding in the room and wouldn't come out." "Brother, could he be a wolf grandmother pretending to be our grandfather?" Sister said in a confused way. Zong Tianyi grew increasingly confused as he listened. He took 2 steps and entered the house. He saw an old man wearing a cap and gray overalls sitting on a chair by the door, reading a newspaper. When he saw Zong Tianyi enter, the old man quickly put down the newspaper and stood up. He looked at him and said in a foreign accent, "You were Tian Yi, right?" Zong Tianyi nodded and looked at the old man. He felt he had seen this face before but couldn't remember where. "Of course, neither you nor your siblings know me. I'm your maternal grandfather." The old man's eyes teared up slightly, a hint of tears flickering faintly. "Even your mother doesn't recognize me anymore," he said as he took a yellowed photo out of his pocket. Zong Tianyi took the picture and saw that it was a group photo of 3 people. He immediately recognized the girl with the ponytail in the middle as his childhood mother and the 2 people next to her. "That's me, and that's your maternal grandmother," the old man next to him pointed. Zong Tianyi then remembered that he had seen this photo before in his family album. After his father had gone missing, the album disappeared. He suspected that his mother had torn it up. Since she had become ill, she often tore things around the house, sometimes even her school books. "Child, your grandmother and I feel guilty about your mother and your siblings. We haven't visited you for so many years, and we didn't know your mother was so sick," the old man said, tears welling up in his wrinkled eyes. "This time, I came to Chuzhou on a business trip, and your grandmother asked me to find you and meet you no matter what." Zong Tianyi didn't know how to face such a tearful grandfather. After all, it was his grandfather. He thought and said to Guzheng, "Little sister, where's Mum? Ask Mum to come and meet Grandpa." Guzheng looked at her grandfather with big, curious eyes. She told Zong Tianyi, Mum said she didn't know Grandpa. She said she was scared and ran out into the street. Your mother doesn't even recognize me. How did she get like this? Grandpa said sadly, taking out his handkerchief to wipe his eyes again. Later, Grandpa wanted to leave. He said he would catch the last bus of the day to Chuzhou and then return to the provincial capital. He mentioned that the next time he wanted to visit was with Grandma. He said, "Child, at your young age, the responsibilities of a family have already fallen on your shoulders. If you have any difficulties, write to Grandpa and Grandma." Grandpa chattered away like an old lady and took a bundle of money out of his pocket to give to Zhang Tianyi. Zhang Tianyi tried to push the pile of notes away and said, as if he were an adult, "I don't want it. I'm going to work in the brick factory. I can earn money and support my mother and sister." But his grandfather just shoved the money into his arms. Before he left, he pulled Guzheng to his side and kissed her on the forehead. At that moment, Zhang Tianyi suddenly felt like he had grown up. As the head of the family, he should take responsibility for supporting his mother and younger sister. Since then, Zhang Tianyi had worked as a temporary laborer in the brick factory every weekend and on holidays. Most of the temporary workers at the brick factory were farmers recruited from nearby villages, but there were also young people like Zhang Tianyi. Their main job was to use a handcart to carry the bricks from the brickworks to the firing workshop, the big cave under the chimney. The handcart, which the people of Pai Town called the chicken cart, was issued by the brick factory. Because of its single wheel, the balance of the chicken cart was not easy to control, and it relied mainly on arm strength to control the handle. Zhang Tianyi was young and lacked arm strength, so he overturned the cart for the first time. The bricks on the cart fell to the ground and broke into pieces. The loss of the bricks would be deducted from his wages. After overturning the cart several times, Zhang Tianyi became increasingly nervous. Whenever he pushed the cart, he felt like facing a great enemy, but the more anxious he was, the more likely he was to make mistakes, and the cart would still tip over. That day, just as Zhang Tianyi was pushing the cart full of brick molds out of the brick factory, the cart started to tip over, and the bricks fell off. It looked like the whole cart was going to fall over. Suddenly, two young boys wearing red scarves ran up from behind and supported the cart from both sides. When Zhang Tian looked up, he saw Wang Cheng and Ba Dong. With their help, the cart drove smoothly all the way into the large cave. When the cart was unloaded, Wang Cheng and Ba Dong helped Zhang Tian move the bricks off the chicken cart. It was already summer, and the temperature inside the large cave was higher than outside. After unloading the brick blocks, the few people were all sweating profusely, as they had just climbed out of the water. "Why were you helping me?" Zhang Tianyi asked, as he handed them the towel around his neck. "To learn from Lei Feng." Wang Cheng lifted his rosy and sweaty face, revealing 2 rows of white teeth. "His father requires students from the elite school to come to the construction site to work on weekends and holidays. Every time they participate in labor, the factory gives them a big ice cream," Badong added. "You only know how to eat. You won't participate in labor if you don't receive ice lollies, right?" Wang Cheng rolled his eyes at Ba Dong. "With your level of consciousness, you're still far from meeting the requirements of a young pioneer." Seeing Wang Cheng and Ba Dong picking on each other again, Zhang Tianyi chuckled. "You two were hilarious. Do you enjoy bickering in your everyday life?" When they heard Zhang Tianyi say that, they felt a sense of embarrassment. "Our houses were right next to each other. I can hear every fart he lets out." Wang Cheng looked at Zhang Tianyi, blinked his eyes, and made a face. "Do you still hate us for catching you last time?" "What's there to hate? I'm more than grateful. If it weren't for you two, would I have the opportunity to work as a temporary worker at the brick factory today?" Zhang Tianyi said sincerely, "As soon as I get paid, I'll treat you both to a meal at a restaurant." "Really? You must keep your word." Badong held out his index finger as if to make a promise. "People who don't keep their promises were scumbags," Zhang Tianyi said and patted his chest. The 3 teenagers became increasingly friendly as they talked, and it seemed as if they had become close friends. Half a year later, Zhang Tianyi received his first paycheck from the brick factory. After deducting the cost of the broken bricks from the overturned cart, he had 201 yuan. In Zhang Tianyi's eyes, this was no small sum, almost enough to support his entire family for a year. Zhang Tianyi never forgot his promise. The first thing he did after receiving his salary was to invite Wang Cheng and Ba Dong to a restaurant. That day, Zhang Tianyi waited at the brick factory's school entrance for quite a while before finally meeting them. When Ba Dong heard that Zhang Tianyi was going to invite them to a restaurant, he almost jumped for joy. He gave him a thumbs up and said, "You keep your word. You're really a man. From now on, I'll think of you as my boss." Wang Cheng hesitated and said, "Are you really going to invite us? If my father finds out, he'll say I'm abusing my privileges." "You're not going? I'm going." Ba Dong smacked his lips deliberately, winked at Zhang Tianyi, and grabbed his arm to leave. Wang Cheng hesitated for a moment, but eventually followed them. This was the first time Zhang Tianyi had served guests since he grew up, and he felt a sense of pride like never before. With a bulging wallet, his heart was also filled with joy. He stood tall and straight, exuding wealth and confidence. On the way into town, he loudly asked Wang Cheng and Ba Dong, "Come on, what do you want to eat?" "I want to eat meat," Ba Dong said first. "I haven't eaten meat for 3 days." "You're lying," Wang Cheng immediately revealed. "Yesterday, your father took you to the cafeteria for lunch and even bought you a plate of stir-fried pork with green peppers." Ba Dong's face immediately turned red. Seeing that they were about to argue again, Zhang Tian changed the subject and asked Wang Sheng, "What do you want to eat?" "Just a bowl of pork noodle soup," Wang Cheng said. "My father hates gluttonous and greedy people the most. He says it's a bourgeois lifestyle." Ba Dong blushed and remained silent. "Don't worry, I guarantee you'll have meat today. I have plenty of money." Zhang Tianyi patted his bulging pouch and comforted Ba Dong. But he knew better. He couldn't be reckless with his money. He had already thought it out. He would invite Wang Cheng and Ba Dong to the small restaurant in the Supply and Marketing Cooperative, where each would have a bowl of pork noodle soup and 2 meat buns. The 3 of them would cost less than 1 yuan, just enough to spend a small portion of their wages. This would satisfy Ba Dong's desire to eat meat without being considered greedy, as Wang Cheng had said. Wouldn't that be the best of both worlds? Many years later, when Zhang Tianyi became a businessman, frequented fine restaurants and hotels, and enjoyed a variety of delicacies, he occasionally recalled the scene when he invited Wang Cheng and Ba Dong to eat pork noodle soup at the Supply and Marketing Cooperative in Pai Town. He remembered that after Ba Dong had finished the noodles and a large meat bun, he licked his tongue and looked at the noodle soup with a layer of oil and scallions as if he hadn't had enough. Zhang Tianyi had no choice but to order another large meat bun for him. Ba Dong's face lit up with a smile, and he gave him a thumbs up and said, "Brother, you were so generous. When I have money, I will also give you pork noodle soup. No, I will treat you to wok dishes and pay you back twice." Wang Cheng's single and double eyelids fluttered disdainfully, and he sneered, "You're just showing off. Is the allowance your father gives you too little? Have you ever invited me over?" Ba Dong wiped his greasy mouth and said, "You didn't invite me, so why should I invite you?" Wang Cheng said, "My dad never gives me an allowance." Ba Dong said, "Your father is so stingy." "Don't speak ill of my father," Wang Cheng said angrily. "My father upholds the spirit of diligence, thrift, and hard work." When Zhang Tianyi saw that they were about to argue again, he had no choice but to stuff 2 large meat buns into their mouths, which finally settled the verbal dispute. After paying the bill, Zhang Tianyi bought another basket of buns to take home to his mother and sister. He thought about taking his sister to the newly opened private clothes shop in town to buy 2 outfits. His mother's shoes had long since worn out, and it was time to buy her a new pair. Such calculations made Zhang Tianyi feel like the head of the family. At some unknown time, Zhang Tianyi developed a prominent Adam's apple on his neck, and his voice became a little deeper when he spoke. His brown hair hung untidily over his forehead, and his gaze was somber, giving him a somewhat rebellious appearance. Some people in Pai Town who knew Zhang Xiaotian and Gu Ying said that this boy had a handsome appearance, resembling his missing father. But Zhang Tianyi's eyes were like his mother's. His mother was a beauty in those days. Do you know who this boy's parents are? Among the educated young people who came from the provincial city to settle in our town, they were truly a talented and beautiful couple. Unfortunately, one disappeared, and one later went mad.